The lantern swings softly in the pale pre-dawn, its glow cutting through the dense weave of shadows that hold the narrow streets of Rome in their grasp. The city lies in a muted hush, a moment of suspension before the vast chorus of voices and footsteps will rise and fill every crevice with noise and life. The wick, fed by oil, hisses faintly, its flame alive with every whisper of breeze that slips between the walls of the insulae. You follow its golden circle as it glides along the cobblestones, catching the sheen of damp stones still slick with dew, and you sense how old this path is, worn by countless feet that have carried bread, amphorae, gossip, and prayers along the same winding alleys. The city breathes even while it sleeps, and the lantern seems to coax that breath into visibility, showing you what the darkness hides. A shutter cracked open to let cool air flow, a stray dog curled near the warmth of a bakery wall, a cart abandoned for the night and waiting for its master to return at dawn. The lantern-bearer does not rush. He walks slowly, measured, his sandals scraping softly. He has walked this route before, perhaps every morning for years, and there is no urgency because the city wakes according to rhythms older than him. Each step reveals another corner of Roman life in its most fragile, secretive state, the quiet before the spectacle. Above, you glimpse balconies draped with drying cloths that sway slightly in the early breeze, faint outlines of figures behind them, perhaps a mother already awake, rocking a restless child, perhaps an elderly man who finds the silence of dawn easier than the clamor of day. You feel the closeness of the walls around you, rising high, patched with plaster, marked by smoke stains and crude repairs. Reminders that life here is practical, pressed together, built layer upon layer, without concern for beauty, but with every intention for survival. The air is heavy with smells that shift as the lantern moves forward. Sharp tang of urine tossed in jars to be collected for washing cloth, faint perfume of herbs from someone's window box, smoke from a dying fire, the first teasing aroma of bread rising unseen but soon to dominate. Rome is a city of scents as much as of sights, and in the darkness they are sharper, guiding your senses where the eye cannot yet go. The flame flickers as the lantern passes under a narrow archway that connects two buildings, where carved stones from older structures have been reused, their inscriptions half hidden, their gods and victories worn away yet still lingering as mute guardians of the alley. The lantern continues, and the soundscape changes too. The drip of water from a gutter, the faint murmur of voices rising from a courtyard below, the squeak of a rat moving quickly out of the glow. Rome is never entirely asleep. Even in this quiet hour, you sense movement: slaves preparing the day's labors, bakers working in the heat of ovens, guards patrolling with the weight of armor. The lantern's bearer knows these presences but acknowledges them only with the steady rhythm of his walking, as if his light belongs to all and must keep moving, must be present wherever night still lingers. You watch how the glow touches surfaces and makes them momentarily alive, an uneven cobblestone gleaming as though polished, a painted wall where a god's face looks stern even in fading colors, an iron-studded door that guards whatever treasures or secrets lie behind it. Each detail is offered briefly, then swallowed again by the night as the flame advances, always revealing, always withdrawing. The city seems infinite in this way, full of endless corners to uncover, each with its own history of footsteps, laughter, sorrow, and ambition. Above, the sky is faintly softening. The horizon whispers of light yet unseen, and you know that soon the lantern's glow will no longer dominate. But in this liminal time, between darkness and dawn, it is the master of the alley. It dictates where the eye may rest, what the memory may hold. You follow, step after step, feeling the cobblestones shift under your imagination, sensing the world that is about to awaken. Every flicker feels like an invitation to lean closer, to notice more, to listen to the quiet stories that stone and shadow keep. The lantern-bearer passes a doorway where an old amphora leans, broken and no longer used for wine, now serving as a makeshift rubbish container. Bits of pottery, wilted greens, and a gnawed bone rest inside. These are fragments of lives too humble to be written in history scrolls, yet they define the real Rome more than the triumphal arches or marble statues. The light lingers on them, as if honoring their existence before drifting away. And you think about how much of the city is built on such fragments, discarded things, forgotten words, lives unnoticed but essential. The alley narrows still further, so that you feel almost enclosed in stone. Overhead, beams from adjoining houses stretch across, draped with ropes where laundry is hung to dry. The lantern sways beneath these ropes, casting long shadows that dance like living figures. Somewhere behind a wall, a cough breaks the silence, followed by the squeal of a pig penned in a courtyard. These sounds remind you that the alley is not empty, only hidden. Every door you pass, every window you glimpse, is another story waiting to unfold as the day grows. The lantern turns a corner, and now you see the faint widening of space, a small square where a fountain stands. The water gurgles faintly, catching the lantern light in tiny glimmers. A woman is already there, filling a jug, her movements quick and quiet. Accustomed to this hour, she nods at the lantern bearer, acknowledging his familiar presence, before slipping back into the shadows of her own insula. The fountain will soon be crowded, but for now it belongs to her, and the lantern's glow honors that brief solitude. The square feels larger after the constriction of alleys, and here the air moves more freely, carrying the scent of cypress from a nearby courtyard. The lantern hovers on the edge of the fountain's light, two flames greeting each other, one natural, one man-made, before the bearer continues into another street. Each transition feels like the city unfolding itself to you slowly, intimately, as though it knows you need time to take in its immensity. The rhythm of footsteps resumes, steady and patient. The lantern moves past a doorway marked with protective charms, little hands carved into stone to ward off the evil eye, and past another doorway where a wreath still hangs, perhaps from a recent festival. You think of how time here is layered past rituals still clinging, present labors just beginning, future hopes waiting with the rising Sunday. The lantern is the thread that connects them, tying night to day, silence to noise, solitude to community. And so you follow, deeper into the city, guided by this fragile flame that seems small against the vastness of Rome, yet strong enough to lead you through its alleys, its secrets, its heart. Every step feels like an initiation, every flicker like a promise that the story of the day is about to begin. The lantern's glow drifts further into the heart of the neighborhood, where the insulae, those towering apartment blocks of brick, plaster and wood, dominate the skyline. Their shapes loom above narrow lanes, stacked high like precarious shelves, each level holding a patchwork of rooms that cradle families, tradesmen, servants, and wanderers. The insula breathes differently from the villa, less stately, more hurried, more raw. As dawn begins to stretch its pale fingers across the city, these giant hives of life stir awake, and you hear it, the creak of shutters being pushed open, the scrape of pots dragged across floors, the muffled voices of neighbors greeting or complaining, as thin walls fail to keep secrets. The insula is a world within walls, where hundreds live pressed close together, each life brushing against the next, whether by choice or necessity. The first sounds are often the most private, a whisper between husband and wife, a child's cry, the shuffle of bare feet on wooden boards. Yet here, privacy is fleeting. The thin partitions made of plastered reeds and rough brick allow every cough, every quarrel, every murmur of gossip to seep through. You imagine the lantern pausing, its glow resting on one such wall where a conversation unfolds. A woman telling her child to hurry and fetch water before the crowds arrive, a man grumbling about the neighbor's smoke filling his own room, an old grandmother muttering prayers to the household gods whose images cling to a dusty shelf. These voices overlap, rising and falling, until the insula becomes a single chorus, a chorus of survival, of routine, of humanity, compressed into too little space. The insula itself tells stories in its bones, cracks spiderweb through plaster where rain has seeped in, wooden beams strain beneath the weight of too many tenants, staircases groan as feet begin their morning climb. Fires are always feared here, for one careless ember can leap from pan to roof and consume an entire block, and so people live with an unspoken tension, their lives arranged around both necessity and fragility. Yet despite the risks, despite the crowding, The insula is alive in a way the quiet villas of the wealthy can never be. Here, you sense the pulse of Rome most strongly, because here the majority dwell artisans, bakers, porters, slaves, freedmen, and those still climbing or sliding along the ladder of fortune. From one upper window, a girl leans out to call her brother, her voice carrying into the street below. From another, a young man tips out the remnants of yesterday's washing water, splashing it onto the stones with little regard for passers-by. A child's hoop clatters down the stairwell, followed by a burst of giggles as it bounces into the lantern's path. These are the small moments that stitch the morning together. You hear greetings exchanged in hurried tones. "Salve, neighbour, did you hear about the new tax?" Or, "The baker says his flour is dearer today." Even in these early hours, gossip travels as quickly as footsteps, and you realize that in Rome, news spreads not through scrolls alone but through walls, courtyards, fountains, and markets, the living web of human voices. The smells of waking life drift through the insular corridors. A pan hisses as oil heats, releasing the sharp scent of garlic. Somewhere, a pot of porridge thickens, filling the air with barley's earthy fragrance. Bread crusts left from the day before are softened in water or wine, while some prepare to queue at the communal ovens. These scents mingle with the less pleasant chamber pots emptied into jars, refuse piled near the alley entrance for collection, smoke rising from hearths that burn cheap wood or dung. Rome is never clean, never pure, but it is honest in its smells, and they remind you of the unbroken chain of lives that have passed through the same routines for centuries. As the lantern-bearer climbs a stairwell, you glimpse the interior world of an insula. Narrow corridors snake between doors, each doorway leading into a single cramped room where entire families may live. Some have small shrines to the lares, household gods, their clay figures smeared with oil and ash from offerings. Others show signs of trade woven into domestic space, a loom pushed into a corner, tools hung upon walls, amphorae stacked for sale. The boundary between work and home here is blurred, for survival demands flexibility. Children wake to the sound of parents already laboring, their lullabies replaced by the clatter of tools. On one floor, a man sharpens a knife for his cobbler's work. On another, a woman carefully sets out painted masks for sale. Across the hallway, a Greek tutor rouses himself to prepare lessons for the children of wealthier households, while downstairs, a slave mutters under his breath as he hauls buckets of water up steep steps. All are connected by the same creaking stair, by the same groaning beams, by the same fragile walls that hold them together in reluctant unity. The lantern lingers, illuminating a child's chalk drawing on plaster, a crude image of a gladiator with arms raised. Even in play, the children absorb the city's obsessions, echoing the grandeur and violence that saturate Roman culture. The gossip grows louder as more residents emerge. On the rooftop terraces where laundry is strung, women exchange whispers about who owes rent, who quarrelled in the night, who has been seen with whom. These conversations slip downward, carried by echo, until they blend with those rising from the street. Rome thrives on rumour. It is the lifeblood of both politics and private life. Here, in the insula, whispered through thin plaster, rumour becomes inevitable. You realise that in such proximity, nothing can truly be hidden, and so people learn to live with exposure, their triumphs celebrated, their failures mocked, their secrets fragile as clay jars. The lantern returns to the street, and already the ground level is busier. Shopkeepers who live in the insula's lower rooms begin pulling back shutters, revealing shelves of goods, oil, wine, cloth, fish, herbs. The line between residence and commerce is blurred here too, as families live above the very stalls that feed their income. You watch as a boy sweeps dust from a doorway, the strokes of his broom echoing the daily renewal of routine. He yawns, scratching his head, as the lantern's glow catches his face for a brief moment, another anonymous life, yet wholly part of Rome's vast story. Neighbours greet one another, not always warmly but inevitably, because walls cannot silence shared existence. A woman pauses to scold a boy for spilling water on the stair, while another complains loudly of smoke seeping through her window from below. These disputes, petty yet persistent, weave themselves into the life of the insula, binding its residents as surely as friendship or kinship. In these quarrels, as in the laughter that follows, you see the resilience of community forced into closeness. Rome may be immense, but here it is intimate, even suffocating, and yet it endures. As dawn strengthens, the insula seems fully awake now. Doors bang open, sandals slap against stone, voices rise and mingle. The lantern no longer dominates the darkness, but it continues to glide, revealing one last glimpse into this hive of humanity. You notice a cat perched on a sill, eyes glowing as it watches the stirrings below. You see an old man sitting on a step, already hunched over his morning ration of bread, his hands steady from habit, and you feel that the insula, for all its noise and its fragility, is the true heart of Rome, not the marble of emperors, not the glory of temples, but the stacked, crowded, imperfect homes where lives are lived day after day with persistence and quiet dignity. And so the lantern moves on, carrying you away from the chorus of waking insulae toward the next scent, the next rhythm of daily life, as the city continues to unroll its vast, intricate story with the rising Sunday. The lantern drifts onward, its glow now softened by the swelling light of dawn, and you find yourself drawn by a new presence, not of sound, but of smell. The alleys of Rome are conduits for aromas, and here the air grows warm, fragrant, alive with the sharp tang of yeast, the earthy scent of grain, the smoke of wood fires licking through ovens. It is toward the bakeries that the lantern leads you, those low buildings where men have been awake long before the rest of the city stirred, working their craft in heat and sweat to prepare the bread that will sustain thousands. In Rome, bread is not merely food, it is the daily proof of survival, the measure of the city's order, the promise that even amid chaos, hunger can be soothed. The bakers carry this burden in their strong arms and flour-caked hands, and you feel the weight of their role as you follow the lantern's circle into the heart of their labor. Inside the bakery, the air is thick and almost suffocating, yet vibrant. Large mills, turned by donkeys walking endlessly in circles, grind the grain into flour, their hooves steady in rhythm, their eyes blindfolded to prevent distraction. The scraping, grinding sound is constant, a heartbeat beneath the chatter of men who shovel, pour, measure, and knead. Dust floats like a golden haze, clinging to skin, hair, and clothing, so that the bakers themselves seem sculpted from the grain they labor with. The lantern flickers across their bent backs, their powerful arms plunging into dough, folding, stretching, pounding with a vigor that is both mechanical and deeply human. These movements have been repeated for centuries, and yet each loaf is unique, shaped by hands, by weather, by the quality of the grain delivered from distant fields along the Tiber or from the provinces of empire. The ovens dominate the room, their mouths glowing with fire that never truly dies. Heat presses outward, reddening faces, soaking tunics with sweat. The bakers slide wooden paddles deep into the flames, pulling forth loaves already browned, their crusts crackling as they cool, then slide in raw dough to take their place. The rhythm is constant, no moment wasted, for the demand is unending. Rome is a city of 1,000,000 mouths, and though not every mouth will taste bread fresh from these ovens, the symbol of its availability is as essential as the bread itself. You can almost hear the echo of emperors past, promising panem et circenses, bread and circuses, as if to say, so long as the belly is filled, the people will endure. Outside the bakery, customers begin to gather, though the hour is still early. Women clutch baskets, children hover nearby. Slaves wait with instructions from their masters. The line forms in murmurs and small complaints, but also in camaraderie, for here neighbors meet daily, sharing news while waiting for the baker's call. The lantern drifts among them, showing you faces weary but hopeful, eyes glancing toward the steaming loaves carried out in baskets. The aroma is irresistible, a force that draws the city together. For the poor, bread may be their only true meal of the day, and so each loaf is precious. For the wealthier, it is merely the base upon which olives, cheese, or meats are added. But for all, it is the same bread, baked in the same ovens, from the same flour ground by donkeys' hooves. In this shared necessity, Rome finds unity. You notice the markings on the loaves, as they are handed out, stamped symbols pressed into the dough before baking, signs of which bakery or which family produced them. Some show patterns of wheat sheaves, others geometric lines, others names carved in abbreviated form. These marks are not decoration but identity, proof of origin, assurance of quality. A loaf without its mark might be suspect, its weight questioned, its flour doubted. In this detail, you glimpse Rome's complexity. Even bread is regulated, its fairness overseen, for to cheat in bread is to provoke unrest. The city knows that hungry bellies become angry voices, and so bread is watched as carefully as gold. Within the bakery, the lantern lingers on one young apprentice, no more than 12, his small hands red from kneading, his tunic dusted white. His eyes flicker with both weariness and pride, for he knows that his labor feeds the city. Beside him, the master baker shouts instructions, his voice hoarse from years of smoke and heat, yet steady with authority. You realize that this place is more than a workshop. It is a guild, a lineage of skill passed down, from master to apprentice, from father to son, across generations. In the loaves they shape, you sense both tradition and survival, the continuation of a craft that will never cease to be needed. The lantern's glow brushes against a shelf stacked with amphorae, where olive oil waits to be drizzled, where garum, the pungent fish sauce beloved by Romans, lingers in sealed jars to be sold alongside the bread. The bakery is not merely a place of loaves, but a hub of nourishment, a node in the city's web of sustenance. Outside, a woman accepts her ration, tucking it into her basket beside figs and onions purchased earlier, while her neighbor leans close to whisper about a senator's latest scandal. Thus, bread becomes the anchor of daily life, the excuse for gathering, the fuel for conversation, the sustenance that binds community. As the morning grows, more loaves are carried out, more hands reach forward, more coins clink into jars. The apprentices work faster now, sweat streaking their brows, muscles straining as the pace quickens. The lantern hovers, catching the gleam of firelight on their faces, the determination etched into their movements. You realize that the life of the city, its politics, its entertainment, its temples and markets, all depend first on this simple transaction: flour into bread, hunger into satiety. Without it, the marble forums would be empty, the temples silent, the amphitheaters bare. Bread sustains Rome, as surely as aqueducts sustain its thirst. And so you follow the lantern as it drifts away from the bakery, leaving behind the heat, the smell, the bustle. You carry with you the image of loaves stacked high, of hands dusted with flour, of neighbors gathered in murmurs. The city is awake now, its people fed or preparing to be, its streets filling with footsteps. Ahead, you hear the trickle of water and the shouts of carriers, and you know the lantern is leading you toward the fountains, where another rhythm of daily life awaits. The lantern drifts from the warmth of the bakery toward a different kind of gathering place, where the scent of bread and smoke gives way to the sharper perfume of fresh water, clay jars, and damp stone. Rome is a city of fountains, each supplied by the long arms of aqueducts that stride across hills and valleys to bring rivers into the heart of the metropolis. These aqueducts are marvels of engineering, but the daily miracle is here, in the small squares where fountains gurgle, their streams tumbling into basins carved of stone, their voices mingling with the chatter of citizens who come to draw from them. The lantern approaches one such fountain, its glow shimmering on the moving surface, revealing ripples that catch dawn's light. Already the square is alive with people, women balancing jars, slaves sent in haste by masters, children splashing hands before being scolded, water carriers jostling with poles across their shoulders. The fountain is both necessity and theatre, and you see how its rhythms shape the day as much as bread. The sound is constant, the gurgle of water spilling, the scrape of amphorae placed against stone, the splash as they fill, the creak of wooden yokes hoisted onto shoulders. Voices rise in waves, greetings between neighbours, sharp quarrels over place in line, laughter at a child's misstep. You realize quickly that the fountain is not merely a source of water but a marketplace of words, where news spreads as swiftly as liquid. Here, the latest prices of grain are murmured, tales of gladiators' training whispered, and scandals of patrician households repeated in hushed but eager tones. Rome's public life is not confined to the forum. It begins in these everyday spaces where citizens and slaves alike must come to quench their household's thirst. The lantern hovers near a woman kneeling at the basin, her tunic gathered, her arms steady as she guides water into a clay jar. Her face is lined from sun and labor, yet her eyes are sharp, attentive to every word spoken nearby. She shifts her weight to catch a fragment of gossip from two men discussing taxes, then straightens to warn her daughter not to spill the precious liquid. The child, wide-eyed, touches the cool water with her fingertips, giggling until her mother pulls her back. The moment is ordinary, yet it contains the fullness of Roman life. Labor, discipline, curiosity, community. Beside her stands a water carrier, a strong man with broad shoulders marked by the weight of his trade. Across his back stretches a wooden yoke, from which hang amphorae balanced carefully, each filled and heavy. His work is ceaseless, for not all households can spare slaves to fetch water, and so he trudges through the streets delivering jars for a fee. His voice is rough, as he bargains with a woman for a better price, his tone rising as another carrier intrudes upon his claim. Soon the quarrel thickens, their shouts echoing across the square, drawing laughter and commentary from the crowd. Quarrels are as common as splashes at the fountain, yet they too are part of its life. The lantern glances across their tense faces before moving on, leaving their dispute to dissolve into the morning din. The fountain itself bears marks of centuries. Its stone edges are smoothed by countless jars, carved grooves etched where water has trickled for decades. In its center stands a small statue, perhaps of a nymph, her features weathered but her form still graceful, a reminder that even necessity is dressed in beauty. Around the basin, moss clings to cracks, glistening in the damp. The lantern lingers here, illuminating how Rome has transformed water into not only survival, but symbol, a daily ritual wrapped in dignity. To draw from a fountain is to touch the empire's reach, the engineering that binds distant springs to this very square. The slaves work quickly, their sandals splashing as they rush to fill jars for their masters. Some carry them on shoulders, others tie them with rope, balancing loads heavier than their bodies can bear. Their faces are expressionless, their movements drilled into habit. Yet even here, among the labourers, murmurs of rumour stir, for no one in Rome can escape the current of voices. A young slave bends low to fill an amphora, his ear turned as his neighbour whispers of a senator caught in scandal. His eyes flicker with amusement, though he dares not speak. News belongs to all, even those who cannot act upon it. Children chase one another near the fountain's edge, their sandals slapping against stone, their laughter echoing between walls. One drops a pebble into the basin, watching ripples spread until an older woman scolds him sharply. Discipline is as constant as play, and the fountain is a stage where generations collide. The lantern swings across their faces, pausing on a boy who dips his hand deep, tasting the water with delight. For him, the fountain is not politics or necessity but wonder, a cool miracle in the heat of the city. Merchants pass by, their carts rumbling, glancing at the crowd as they head toward markets. They too pause to listen, to catch fragments of gossip, to measure the mood of the people. For in Rome, the crowd is a force, its murmur a warning or a promise. The fountain amplifies that murmur, turning necessity into chorus. You sense how fragile the balance is. Should water ever fail, unrest would swell as quickly as a flood. Bread may fill bellies, but water sustains all, and so the fountain is both gift and pressure point. The lantern hovers one last time, casting its glow across the jars now lifted and balanced, the shoulders stooped beneath their weight, the women guiding children away, the men resuming their quarrels. The fountain does not empty, it only shifts its audience. Soon another wave will arrive, drawn by thirst, by duty, by routine. The lantern moves on, leaving behind the sound of water's endless song, leading you towards steam and voices rising from another place where Romans gather daily, where stone chambers and flowing baths promise both cleansing and conversation. The lantern moves steadily away from the fountain, its glow trailing through streets that now pulse with new energy. Dawn has taken firm hold, brightening the sky above the rooftops, but the lantern still burns with quiet dignity, as if reminding you that it remains a faithful guide through the city's rhythms. Ahead, you sense a different kind of gathering, a place where the sounds are more resonant, the air heavy with warmth and steam, and voices echo against vaulted stone. Rome's baths, the thermae, are not merely places of cleansing. They are palaces of social life, forums of conversation, arenas of negotiation, sanctuaries of leisure. And in this early hour, when the fires have already heated the waters and the attendants have swept the floors, citizens begin to arrive, drawn not only by the promise of cleanliness, but by the deeper need to be among others, to weave themselves into the living fabric of the city. The lantern drifts toward one such bathhouse, humbler than the grand thermae of emperors, but no less vital to its neighborhood. The entrance is already busy. Slaves carry baskets of oil and towels. Young men joke boisterously as they strip off tunics. Older men nod in recognition to one another with gestures of familiarity. The air is heavy with the mingling scents of smoke, wet stone, and olive oil. You feel the anticipation, for to enter the baths is to leave behind the dust of streets, the weight of labor, and step into a space where body and spirit may both be renewed. Inside, the lantern reveals walls adorned with fading frescoes, simple yet elegant dolphins leaping, nymphs pouring water, vines curling across plaster. The stone beneath your feet is damp, smooth from countless bare soles. Attendants, their movements quick and practiced, collect sandals, store clothes, and guide patrons through the sequence of chambers. The murmur of voices thickens, echoing through the vaulted ceilings, carrying laughter, greetings, debates, whispers of politics, and even secrets. Rome's baths are democratic in a way few places are. Senator and shopkeeper, artisan and freedman, they share the same pools, their differences softened by steam. The lantern lingers in the apoditerium, the changing room, where men strip down, their bodies marked by labor, by scars, by age. Here, one sees Rome's diversity, plainly skin darkened by sun, limbs hardened by work, bellies rounded by feasting, backs stooped by toil, yet all step forward alike, bare, equal in their human form. Some chat idly, others gesture animatedly about last night's chariot races, others stand silent, their minds elsewhere. Slaves rub oil into their master's skin, preparing them for the scrape of strigils that will cleanse dirt and sweat. The lantern glows across bronze mirrors propped on shelves, jars of perfume, baskets of towels, small luxuries that remind you this place is as much ritual as necessity. Beyond lies the tepidarium, the warm room, where heat envelops the body like a gentle embrace. Steam curls upward, blurring the outlines of men seated on benches, their voices softened by the humid air. The lantern wavers in the mist, its flame made smaller yet more intimate, casting light on droplets that cling to walls. Here, conversations deepen. A merchant discusses a new shipment of Egyptian grain. A lawyer mutters advice to a client about a pending trial. Two friends reminisce about military campaigns along the Rhine. The room hums with a quiet intensity, as though the warmth loosens not only the skin but the tongue. Words flow as freely as water, and in their exchange, the life of Rome is sustained. From the tepidarium, some move into the caldarium, the hot chamber, where the air is thick and almost unbearable, heated by braziers and hollow pipes that channel fire beneath the floor. The lantern seems to strain here, its flame bending in the oppressive warmth. Sweat glistens on every surface, bodies gleam, and breath comes heavy. In the pools of hot water, men sink with sighs, their muscles loosening, their minds lulled. The sound is of splashing, of strigils scraping oil and dirt from skin, of grunts and laughter as the heat overwhelms. Yet even here, conversations persist, for Romans cannot resist discourse. One man explains the intricacies of a new law, another boasts of his horse's triumph at the circus, another complains of the rising cost of firewood. Even in this intensity, Rome is not silent. Then, at last, the frigidarium beckons the cold plunge. Here, The lantern shudders as its flame meets the sharp chill of water splashing. Men cry out as they leap in, their bodies jolted awake, their laughter ringing louder, sharper. The pool is carved of stone, its surface reflecting the lantern's wavering light like broken glass. For a moment, the noise of argument and gossip fades into pure exclamation as bodies shock themselves into clarity. Emerging, dripping, and shivering, men grin at one another, renewed, alive. This ritual of heat and cold binds them, makes them feel whole, part of a rhythm larger than themselves. Around the edges of the baths, vendors circulate with snacks, dates, nuts, honey cakes, and jars of cheap wine, for refreshment extends beyond water. Massages are offered in corners, where skilled hands knead muscles with oil, murmurs of pleasure mingling with sighs of relief. Others recline simply to rest, their eyes closing as the steam wraps them in a cocoon. You see how the baths are more than cleansing. They are theatre, market, court, school, and sanctuary all at once. Deals are struck in whispers, friendships are tested in debate, political alliances take root in casual remarks. Rome's greatness is not only forged in Senate chambers, but in these steamy halls where men speak freely, their words flowing as naturally as sweat. The lantern drifts through these spaces, its glow, highlighting details, a carved dolphin spout gushing water, a bronze strigil gleaming in a slave's hand, a senator's ring left carelessly on a bench, a boy laughing as he splashes his father. Each fragment is ordinary, yet together they weave the texture of Roman life. You realize that in the baths, Rome becomes itself most vividly, communal, restless, indulgent, talkative, human. And as the lantern moves toward the exit, you feel the transition once more from steam to air, from intimacy to the broader noise of the city outside. Men emerge cleansed, refreshed, their voices carrying into the streets, ready now for business, for politics, for trade. The baths have done their work. They have washed away the dust of sleep, the sweat of labor, the heaviness of night, and they have given back a city ready to live its day. The lantern glows on, leading you from the murmuring warmth into the vast expanse where the Forum itself is stirring, where marble and markets await, and where Rome's heartbeat grows louder with every step. The lantern drifts out of the vapor and warmth of the baths and into the broadening light of morning, its flame softer now, for the sun itself begins to gild the rooftops and temples with a brilliance no man-made oil lamp could rival. Yet still it leads you forward, into the widening streets where the pulse of the city begins to gather, where all paths seem to bend toward the same heart, the Forum. Here, the center of Rome beats with life each morning, not only in the physical weight of marble colonnades and triumphal arches, but in the restless energy of its people. The Forum is not merely a square, it is the soul of the city exposed in stone and sound. And as you arrive with the lantern, you see how it stirs from its nightly slumber, how it shakes off the hush of dawn to become once more the great theatre of Roman daily life. At first it is the space that overwhelms you. The Forum stretches out like a valley of stone, framed by temples whose columns rise like white forests, by basilicas whose arches command respect, by statues of men whose deeds are etched into the very memory of Rome. The lantern flickers across these surfaces, catching the stern face of a senator in bronze, the polished relief of a goddess carved in marble, the inscriptions on altars and plinths that speak of victories, dedications, laws. These stones have seen centuries pass, emperors rise and fall, triumphs celebrated and riots quelled. Now they watch as the city stirs once more, as the voices of the living begin to replace the silence of night. Vendors arrive first, their carts creaking over the cobblestones. They lay out wares with practiced hands, scrolls copied overnight by weary scribes, herbs bundled into fragrant heaps, shoes lined neatly in pairs, small figurines of gods carved from clay. Their voices rise as they call to one another, staking corners, negotiating prices, laughing at jokes carried over from yesterday. Around them, the first customers drift in slaves sent on errands, young men eager for gossip, women curious to see the day's offerings. The Forum is a marketplace of things, but also of words, of presence, of reputation. Next come the magistrates, carried in litters or striding with retinues, their togas arranged carefully, their faces set with solemnity. They head toward the basilicas, those vast halls of marble where cases will be heard, disputes judged, contracts signed. The lantern glances off their ivory curule chairs as they are placed within, symbols of authority polished to shine. Clerks unfurl scrolls, assistants whisper reminders, litigants pace nervously. For in Rome, justice is not hidden. It is a spectacle played out before the people, and the forum is its stage. Orators, too, begin to gather, stepping onto rostra, the raised platforms from which voices carry across the square. Their gestures are dramatic, their tones practiced to rise and fall like music. Some speak of new laws, some denounce rivals, some praise patrons, some stir the crowd with promises. The lantern hovers on the face of one young orator, his eyes bright, his voice trembling at first but gaining strength as the crowd murmurs in approval. Here, reputation can be made or unmade in an hour, a single phrase remembered or mocked for years. The forum listens with 1,000 ears, judges with 1,000 eyes. Among them mingle ordinary citizens, artisans on pause from their labours, farmers in from the countryside, freedmen eager to be seen. They form knots of conversation, debating the merits of speeches, weighing the fairness of magistrates, repeating scraps of gossip from the baths or the fountain. Politics in Rome is not confined to scrolls and decrees. It is lived in these voices, these clusters of men who argue beneath the open sky. The lantern glides among them, illuminating faces animated with passion, with frustration, with hope. You realize that to walk through the forum is to swim through a sea of opinion, each wave colliding with another, shaping the current of the city's mood. At the edges of the square stand the temples, their steps already busy with worshippers. Some bring small offerings, coins, flowers, incense. Others simply stand in reverence, heads bowed. Priests move deliberately, their white robes stark against the coloured marble, their gestures solemn as they prepare sacrifices. The lantern pauses here, casting light on smoke beginning to curl upward from an altar, the smell of burning herbs mingling with the sharper scent of fresh blood. Even here, amid politics and commerce, the gods are present, their influence woven into every decision, every speech, every bargain struck. To Rome, the divine is never far from the human. The noise grows steadily until the forum is alive with a symphony of sound, the cries of vendors hawking wares, the calls of orators lifting over the crowd, the laughter of youths mocking a magistrate's pomp, the chants of priests, the braying of donkeys pulling carts, the clatter of sandals striking stone. The lantern, once the master of darkness, now seems small, yet it continues to guide you, not with brilliance but with intimacy, showing you details that might otherwise be lost in the grandeur. A hand slipping a coin into another's palm in quiet bribery, a slave scribbling notes on a wax tablet as his master dictates, a beggar stretched at the base of a column, hand outstretched, eyes pleading. These are the smaller truths of the forum, the ones history books may forget, but that define its daily reality. The statues, silent and immovable, watch all of this. The faces of emperors, carved to look eternal, stare out across the tumult. Some are still garlanded from recent festivals, flowers beginning to wither. Others show cracks where time has worn at stone. Yet all stand as reminders that Rome is not only present but past, that today's speeches, today's disputes, today's laughter will one day fade into memory, leaving only stone and inscription. The lantern glances across them, as if urging you to remember that beneath the noise lies continuity, the long thread of a city always awake, always remaking itself. And as the sun rises higher, filling every marble column with brilliance, the forum reaches its full crescendo. The crowd thickens, the arguments sharpen, the deals grow bolder. From this square, decisions ripple outward into every quarter of Rome, into provinces far across seas, into the very fabric of empire. The forum is awake, alive, unyielding, its heartbeat steady, its breath rising with the multitude that fills it. The lantern moves quietly onward, its glow almost shy amid the daylight, leading you away from the great roar of politics toward the hushed courtyards of temples, where the gods are petitioned with incense and prayers. The lantern moves slowly now, its little flame paling in the strength of the rising sun, but still it draws your gaze toward the solemn forms that rise at the forum's edge. The temples, austere and splendid, stand above the bustle of merchants and orators like watchful guardians, their steps broad and worn from centuries of feet, their columns stretching high in pale stone against the sky. Here the rhythm of Rome shifts, where the forum is noisy, impatient, and restless. The temples breathe more deeply, their courtyards filled with incense smoke, the murmur of prayers, and the steady pace of ritual. To step into these spaces is to feel the city's pulse slow, as if the divine demands not clamor but reverence. The lantern glows faintly across the faces of worshippers climbing the steps, each bearing some token: a wreath, a coin, a bowl of fruit, a pinch of incense in a small dish. They are ordinary people, their tunics plain, their sandals dusty, yet here they stand with heads bowed, their hands lifted in the hope that gods will bend their ears. The gods of Rome are many, their temples scattered like constellations across the city. Jupiter, king of heaven, thunders from his great Capitoline temple. Venus, radiant with beauty, receives whispered pleas from lovers. Mercury, patron of merchants, smiles upon those bargaining in the forum, and countless others, from Mars of war to obscure household deities, all with their altars and their flames. To the Roman mind, the divine world is not far but always near, ready to intercede or to punish. The lantern lingers on one temple courtyard where priests are already busy. White-robed, their heads veiled, they move with deliberate precision, every gesture codified by tradition. An attendant leads a goat forward, its horns decorated with ribbons, its fleece sprinkled with wine. The animal steps nervously, its eyes reflecting the lantern's faint flame. The priest raises his hand, murmurs words learned by heart, and the crowd falls into hush. A moment later, the sacrifice is complete. The goat's blood drains into a bronze vessel, its body laid upon the altar's fire. Smoke curls upward, thick and pungent, mixing with the sweetness of incense. Faces in the crowd tilt skyward, watching the smoke as though it carries their prayers. For Romans, sacrifice is not cruelty but communication. The gods demand signs, and humans give them in the hope of favor returned. The lantern drifts closer to the altar, illuminating its surface, blackened from countless offerings, yet still carved with reliefs of divine figures, eagles, laurel leaves, thunderbolts. Here, a woman places a small cake of honey, her lips moving silently. Perhaps she prays for a child, or for her husband's safe return, or for a debt to be forgiven. Another man casts coins upon the steps, each clink echoing faintly, his brow furrowed as though bargaining with unseen powers. These are moments of vulnerability, of humanity laid bare before gods who may or may not listen. The temple is thus not merely stone and ritual, but the collective yearning of thousands, layered day after day, century upon century. Inside the temple's cella, the innermost chamber, looms the statue of the god, larger than life, its features severe yet calm. Painted once in vivid colours, perhaps gilded with gold, it gazes outward with eyes that see beyond human time. Before it stands the altar, where priests renew the fire daily, keeping alive the flame that symbolizes divine presence. The lantern's glow, though feeble here, seems to acknowledge a kinship, one flame to another, mortal to immortal. For the Romans, these fires are the very breath of the gods, and to let them die would be unthinkable. Around the steps, augurs watch the sky, their eyes trained on the flight of birds. In the rustle of wings, they read omens, signs of favor or warning. Should a raven croak harshly, should an eagle soar above, they take it as divine speech. Others consult entrails of the sacrificed goat, peering with grave faces, interpreting shapes of liver or patterns of veins. These are the languages of the gods, and men lean forward to hear their meaning. In this way, decisions of state and choices of households alike are bound to rituals, to signs, to the belief that nothing is random, everything touched by the divine. The lantern sways across the crowd, catching faces lost in prayer, lips whispering vows. Some promise offerings in return for healing, others plead for mercy in matters of law, Some simply give thanks for another day. Children tug at their mothers' robes, wide-eyed at the spectacle of flames and chants. Old men stand silent, their gazes distant, as though remembering countless ceremonies past. And you realize that the temples, for all their grandeur, are ultimately human spaces, where frailty, hope, and reverence meet beneath towering columns. On the outer walls, graffiti tell a quieter story. Scratched lines plead for Venus to bring a lover's affection, or for Fortuna to turn luck toward a dice throw. These humble marks, carved by hands too timid or too poor to approach the altar, speak as loudly as the richest offerings. They remind you that the gods are approached by all, in ways both formal and secret. The lantern's flame passes across these crude letters, honoring them too, for even the smallest plea contributes to the great chorus rising daily toward the heavens. As the morning grows, the temples swell with activity. Processions pass, with musicians playing flutes and drums, their rhythms guiding garlanded youths who carry more offerings. Priests chant in sonorous voices, their words echoing against marble. The smoke thickens, drifting into the streets, mingling with the shouts of vendors and the arguments of orators. Thus the sacred and the profane overlap, for in Rome there is no separation. The gods are woven into politics, trade, family, war. Their presence is assumed, their favor essential. To walk past a temple is to feel the weight of eternity pressing against the present. The lantern moves at last away from the great steps, its glow faint against the sun but steady. Behind you, the temples continue to breathe incense and chant, to absorb prayers and offerings, to watch over the forum with the impassive eyes of marble gods. Ahead lies another form of spectacle, not of prayer but of flesh and blood, where the city's hunger for entertainment finds its most brutal and mesmerizing expression. The Colosseum looms in the distance, and the lantern turns its path toward the shadow of gladiators. The lantern glides away from the incense-filled courtyards of temples, carrying you deeper into the city where the air changes again. The smoke of sacrifices is replaced by the raw scent of sweat, leather, and iron. Rome, for all its reverence to gods, is equally devoted to spectacle, and none of its entertainments loom larger in the imagination than the games of gladiators. Ahead, rising immense against the skyline, you glimpse the curving bulk of the amphitheatre, the Colosseum, its stone arches layered one upon another, towering like a mountain crafted by human hands. Even in the early morning, with the games yet to begin, the space around it thrums with anticipation, as if the very walls absorb and hold the shouts of past crowds. The lantern's flame flickers across those arches, casting momentary shadows that recall the countless lives spent within fighters, spectators, sellers, slaves, emperors, all drawn into its orbit. But before the grandeur of the arena itself, you are drawn to the shadows nearby, where the gladiators train in their barracks. The ludus, a training school, sits close by, and from within its walls comes the rhythm of practice, the crack of wooden swords striking shields, the grunt of exertion, the bark of an instructor commanding discipline. The lantern's glow slips through an open gate and into a courtyard where men move in controlled patterns, each thrust and parry rehearsed endlessly. Their bodies are marked by scars, their muscles taut, their eyes fierce. They are men owned, bought, and trained for violence. Yet in this space they are also students, apprentices to the art of combat that may one day win them fame or claim their lives. The instructors, veterans themselves, pace among the fighters with rods in hand, correcting stances, demanding precision. Wooden swords rudis clash again and again, each impact ringing like a promise of future blood. Some men fight with shields broad and heavy, others with small bucklers. Some practice the net and trident of the retiarius, others the curved sword of the Thracian. The variety of their weapons reflects the variety of their fates, for each will one day step into the arena, not only against a man but against the expectations of a crowd hungry for novelty. The lantern lingers on the sweat that drips from their brows, on the grit beneath their feet, on the silent determination etched into their faces. Around the edges of the courtyard, you see the division of status. Some gladiators are slaves, captured in war or condemned by law, their fate sealed by chains as much as by combat. Others are volunteers, desperate men who sold themselves to the arena for money, for glory, for a chance at something greater than anonymity. These latter wear a different pride, though their end may be no different. Yet all trained side by side, bound by the same discipline, the same demand for spectacle. The lantern shows you the strange paradox of their lives, despised as lowly, yet cheered as heroes, forced, yet celebrated, mortal, yet almost divine in the eyes of a crowd intoxicated by blood. Beyond the courtyard lie the cells, dark and cramped, where gladiators sleep between trainings. The lantern passes their barred doors, illuminating scratched graffiti on the walls. Here, fighters have carved names, prayers, drawings of helmets and swords, even boasts of victories. Some scrawl crude wishes to gods, others messages to lovers they will never see again. In these marks, you feel their humanity most keenly, their need to leave some trace of themselves beyond the sand of the arena. For once the gate opens and the crowd roars, tomorrow is never guaranteed. You sense, too, the atmosphere outside the ludus. Vendors are already setting up stalls near the amphitheatre's entrances, their baskets filled with nuts, bread, olives, wine diluted with water. Boys chase one another, pretending to be gladiators, wooden sticks clashing in mimicry of the men within. Rumors spread quickly here, which fighters will appear, which beasts have been brought from Africa, which senator sponsors the games. The lantern glows on eager faces, their excitement palpable. To them, gladiators are legends in the making, names to be chanted, lives to be gambled upon in bets that may ruin or enrich. The games are not yet begun, but the city is already preparing, already feeding the hunger that only blood can satisfy. And yet, behind this spectacle lies something darker. The lantern lingers on a group of chained men led toward the barracks' new recruits, their eyes filled with dread. Some stumble, their bodies weak from imprisonment. Others stare defiantly, already resigned. They will be trained, molded, thrown into combat whether they wish it or not. Their arrival is met with indifference by seasoned gladiators, for all know the cycle. Some will survive, some will fall, all will feed the crowd's craving. You see in this moment the cruelty that underpins the grandeur, the reality that Rome's glory is built on the suffering of the many for the thrill of the few. Inside the amphitheatre itself, empty still, the lantern reveals a vastness almost overwhelming. The tiers of stone seats curve upward in endless rings, able to hold tens of thousands of voices. The arena floor, smooth and raked, waits silently. Below it, hidden chambers and cages hold the mechanisms of surprise elevators that will raise beasts into the light, trapdoors that will spill fighters suddenly into combat. The silence now is haunting, as if the space itself anticipates the violence to come. The lantern glimmers across the sand, and for a moment you imagine it stained dark, the echo of roars shaking the walls. Even empty, the Colosseum breathes with memory. The sun climbs higher, gilding the stone arches, and soon the space will fill with bodies, with shouts, with the press of humanity drawn to its most primal spectacle. But for now, you remain in the shadows, where gladiators prepare, where trainers bark, where new recruits shiver, where legends are rehearsed in sweat and pain. The lantern moves slowly away, its flame trembling as though heavy with what it has shown. Rome is a city of contradictions, temples of gods beside schools of fighters, prayers for mercy beside cries for blood. And as you follow the light onward, you sense the city will reveal still more of its trades, its streets alive with the labors of men and women who keep its vast body breathing each day. The lantern leaves behind the shadow of the Colosseum and the barracks of gladiators, carrying you once more into the intricate weave of Rome's streets. The morning has advanced now. The sun is higher, the air warmer, and the city beats with full vigor. The forum resounds with speeches, the temples smoke with offerings, the baths echo with laughter. Yet beyond these grand centres lies the dense lattice of working quarters, where the lifeblood of Rome is shaped by countless hands. Here, in the narrow lanes of craftsmen and tradesmen, the lantern drifts, showing you how the city's greatness is sustained not only by marble arches and senatorial decrees, but by the daily work of cobblers, smiths, potters, perfumers, and all the humble professions that keep Rome alive. The streets are crowded, narrower than the grand avenues, their walls close and irregular, their air thick with sound and scent. From every open doorway comes the ring of tools, the hiss of heat, the scrape of stone, the hammering of iron. These are not polished spaces but raw, full of energy, filled with the smell of labor. The lantern glows faintly across a row of workshops, each a world unto itself, yet all connected in a chain of survival. At one open stall, cobblers work, their benches cluttered with scraps of leather, awls, and needles. They sit, bent forward, their fingers deft as they stitch soles, cut straps, polish boots. Customers stand nearby, bargaining, complaining of last week's pair already worn thin, demanding new sandals in time for a festival. Children peer curiously at the piles of shoes, tugging at their mothers' hands. The cobblers themselves speak little, their concentration deep, though sometimes they lift their heads to trade sharp remarks with neighbours, or to call an apprentice to fetch more thread. The lantern glows on their work, illuminating the stitches that bind leather to leather, small, precise motions that connect directly to the strides of Rome's countless feet. Without them, no senator would stride in dignity, no soldier march in rhythm, no child chase hoops through alleys. Next, the smiths. Their forges roar, their hammers ring, and sparks leap like fireflies in the dim light. The lantern hovers here, its flame flickering against the brighter glow of molten metal. Men stripped to their waists raise heavy hammers, striking iron again and again upon anvils. The sound is relentless, a heartbeat of industry that echoes through the lane. The air smells of smoke and hot iron, thick and choking, yet the smiths breathe it with ease, their lungs hardened by years of work. Around them lie tools of every kind, nails, hinges, knives, sickles, swords. Each piece is vital, each a fragment of Rome's vast machinery. Customers come and go, their needs as varied as the smith's wares. A farmer needing a new ploughshare, a householder, a lock for his door, a soldier, a sharper blade. The smiths provide all, their sweat shaping the city's very skeleton. Beyond the clang of iron lies the softer world of potters. Their wheels spin with steady rhythm, clay rising beneath their hands into bowls, jars, amphorae. The lantern drifts across shelves stacked with vessels in every stage of life, damp clay soft and waiting, half-dried shapes firming in air, finished pots glowing red from the kiln. Children watch in fascination as lumps of earth transform under skilled fingers into perfect symmetry. Potters' wives paint designs, vines, animals, simple patterns, while apprentices carry loads to and from the kiln. The smell here is different, earthy, sharp, with clay dust, warm from the kiln's heat. You realize that without these vessels, Rome's wine, oil, grain, and water would have no home. Amphorae are the silent carriers of empire, sailing in ships across seas, rolling on carts down roads, standing in rows in shops and kitchens, and here they are born, shaped by hands in a workshop narrow and crowded. Then there are the perfumers, whose craft seems gentler, but no less important. Their stalls are filled with tiny flasks of glass and ceramic, each holding oils infused with roses, lavender, myrrh, or the rarer spices brought from the east. The air around them is heavy with fragrance, almost intoxicating amid the harsher smells of iron and clay. Women gather here, their fingers testing scents, their voices rising in laughter as they bargain for a flask. Men come too, some wealthy and seeking costly mixtures, others humble but wishing for at least a drop of sweetness in their lives. The perfumers work delicately, mixing oils with precision, their hands steady as priests at sacrifice. The lantern glows across their tables, where light glints in glass and colour shimmers like jewels. Here you see another face of Rome, not survival, but adornment. The longing for beauty, for allure, for moments of pleasure amid toil. The streets are alive with more than these few trades. You glimpse woodcarvers chiselling statues for shrines, dyers stirring vats of cloth into brilliant hues of red and purple, bakers' apprentices running with baskets, scribes hunched over tablets, barbers shouting invitations from their stools, rope makers twisting fibres, fishmongers laying out their glistening catch. Each trade spills into the street, so that walking through this quarter, is like passing through a living encyclopedia of labor. The lantern floats gently over it all, illuminating fragments, a knife blade gleaming in the forge, a child spinning a potter's wheel too quickly, a woman lifting a jar of perfume to her nose, an old man bargaining fiercely for a new pair of sandals. You notice too the texture of community here. Tradesmen shout greetings across alleys, borrow tools, complain of taxes, warn each other of inspectors passing by. Apprentices run errands between stalls, carrying gossip as well as goods. Children play among the workshops, their laughter cutting through the harsher noises. These streets, though crowded and noisy, are bound by familiarity. Everyone knows everyone, or knows someone who does. Disputes break out quickly over noise, over customers, over boundaries, but they are settled just as quickly, for work must continue. The lantern glows on faces flushed with effort, eyes quick with calculation, mouths smiling or scowling, all woven into the fabric of Rome's working life. As the sun rises higher, casting sharper light into the lanes, the work grows more intense. The smiths strike harder, the potters spin faster, the cobblers stitch without pause. Customers crowd the stalls, voices overlapping, coins clinking, disputes swelling. The air is thick with effort, with trade, with the relentless demand of a city that never ceases to need more. And yet, amid all this bustle, there is pride. Every stitch, every spark, every curve of clay, every drop of oil, each is a mark of skill, a claim to worth in a city that measures men not only by status, but by what they produce. The lantern moves slowly onward, leaving behind the clang of forges, the scent of perfumes, the hum of bargaining. These are the trades that keep Rome alive, the hidden engines of its glory. But beyond these streets lies another layer of expression, less formal, less controlled, yet equally telling the whispers and scrawls left upon walls, the graffiti that reveal the private voices of Rome. And so the lantern turns toward the alleys once more, where walls themselves speak. The lantern drifts now into quieter alleys, away from the clamorous clatter of hammers and wheels, into the narrow spaces where walls themselves become storytellers. Here, in the worn plaster of Rome's insulae, in the shaded corners of taverns, in the margins of temples and baths, the voices of ordinary people linger in scratches and paint, in hasty lines carved with nails or charcoal. Graffiti, the whispers of walls, are Rome's hidden literature, not the speeches inscribed on marble or the decrees read aloud in the forum, but the fleeting thoughts of men and women who had little else by which to record their presence. The lantern glows upon these etchings, bringing to life the murmurs of neighbours, the boasts of lovers, the jeers of rivals, the prayers of the humble. On one wall, near a tavern, you see crude words scrawled. Lucius owes 2 denarii. The letters are uneven, scratched quickly, perhaps by a creditor in frustration or a rival in mockery. Another hand, perhaps days later, has added a reply. Lucius paid nothing and never will. The exchange, silent yet visible, continues as others join in until the wall is a dialogue of accusation and defense. The lantern flickers across these words, showing how stone has become a forum of its own, where debts are debated without magistrates, where reputation is at the mercy of passing eyes. Nearby, a different inscription catches the light, a lover's plea to Venus. I love Julia, may she love me. The letters are larger, more carefully shaped, as though the carver hoped the goddess herself might notice. Around it, others have added their own names, their own wishes, so that the wall becomes a palimpsest of desire. Some messages are tender. Marcus loves Claudia, may they live happily. Others bold and bawdy, full of innuendo that makes passing youths giggle. The lantern lingers here, illuminating not only the words but the faint outlines of hearts and figures sketched beside them. Crude drawings of men and women entwined, echoes of laughter still clinging to the plaster. Farther along, the lantern reveals more biting graffiti, insults hurled at neighbours, political jabs at magistrates, jeers at gladiators. Emilius is a coward, Cornelia is unfaithful, Victor the gladiator has fled the arena. These scratches speak of rivalry, of envy, of mockery carried in secret yet broadcast in public. No one escapes such commentary, not even emperors. In some alleys, Crude caricatures of powerful men are etched, their faces distorted, their names twisted. The walls give license to speak what mouths dare not. Here, hidden among the labyrinth of alleys, Rome's truest opinions surface, sharp and unfiltered. The lantern glides past drawings, two stick figures of gladiators with swords raised, crude outlines of ships with sails unfurled, caricatures of animals, even of men caught in comical poses. These sketches are simple yet powerful, for they reveal not only skill but imagination. Children scratch games of tic-tac-toe, leaving grids on walls long after their laughter has faded. Dice numbers, scratched hastily, hint at games of chance played in shadow. The lantern glows softly, as if honouring these fragments of play, these marks of leisure amid toil. In some quarters, graffiti turned toward devotion. On the walls of a temple, someone has written, "To Isis, may she heal my mother." Another hand nearby, "To Mars, grant me victory." These are not official dedications carved in marble, but personal prayers, scratched quickly by hands too poor or too humble for formal sacrifice. Yet they carry weight, for they reveal faith alive in the most ordinary. The gods are not only approached in temples by priests, but invoked in alleys, on plaster, in whispers of chalk and charcoal. The lantern touches these faint marks, almost invisible in daylight, making them glow briefly, as if the gods themselves pause to read. The graffiti tells stories of daily life too. Lists of goods sold, advertisements for taverns, notices of gladiatorial games appear scrawled across walls. "Come to the tavern of Sextus, best wine in the Subra." On the Ides, the great games, 20 pairs of gladiators, no charge. These announcements mingle with personal musings, so that walls become both newspaper and diary. The lantern flickers across one particularly crowded stretch, where so many hands have written that the plaster is layered in overlapping lines, an archive of a neighborhood's voice. Here you see Rome not in marble decrees but in human murmur, a chorus of fleeting words preserved in stone. There are moments of beauty too, surprising in their delicacy. The lantern glows upon a short poem scratched in neat hand. "I admire you, wall, for not collapsing under the weight of so many scribblings. The humor is plain, the wit timeless, and you smile to think of a passerby pausing to read and laugh centuries ago." Elsewhere, verses of love, fragments of Greek lines, bits of philosophy appear, as if the city itself encouraged everyone to become a writer, if only for a moment, if only in passing. The walls are democratic. They hold the voices of slaves and senators alike, all reduced to scratches of equal weight. The lantern lingers longest on one message, faint and almost erased by time. "I was here." Just 3 words, yet they carry the force of every human desire to leave a trace, to assert presence against the erasure of time. Perhaps it was carved by a child, perhaps by a soldier on leave, perhaps by someone who felt invisible. The lantern makes the words glow one last time, as if promising that the writer is not forgotten. Around you, the walls continue to speak, though many voices have faded, washed by rain or plastered over by new construction. Yet you know that beneath the layers, beneath the centuries, they remain, waiting for eyes to uncover them again. Graffiti are not noise but memory, the city's subconscious etched in secret. Rome is more than emperors and battles. It is also Lucius, who owed 2 denarii, Julia, who was loved, Emilius, who was mocked, and the nameless hand that wrote, "I was here." Chels, the lantern moves on, leaving behind the murmuring plaster, carrying you toward another kind of sound, lighter, brighter, filled not with whispers but with laughter and play. For beyond the walls that remember, Rome's children fill the alleys with games, their voices echoing in the dust and stone. The lantern moves from the scratched walls where adult worries and whispered secrets are preserved into streets alive with a different energy, the rhythm of children's laughter and the clatter of their games. In the spaces between Rome's great monuments, in the courtyards of the insulae, along the edges of markets and baths, children spill into alleys, as naturally as water fills a basin. Their presence softens the weight of marble and politics. For here the empire's future is still small, noisy, and curious. The lantern glows across their faces, some dust-streaked, some mischievous, some solemn in imitation of elders, and you feel the balance of Rome, a city of senators and slaves, yet also of children who chase hoops through the dawn. The air is lighter here, filled with high-pitched voices, shouts of triumph, groans of defeat, laughter that bounces off plastered walls. A group of boys crouch together over the cobblestones, throwing small objects with practiced flicks of the wrist. Knucklebones, their dice of play, clatter across the stones, landing in patterns that decide winners and losers. The lantern flickers across their intense faces as they lean forward, arguing about scores, accusing one another of cheating. An older boy boasts of his skill, only to have his younger brother win the round, and the crowd erupts in jeers and laughter. The game is simple, but the passion is real, and you see how children rehearse here the competitiveness that rules Rome itself. Not far away, others chase a rolling hoop, guiding it with sticks down the length of the alley. The sound is sharp, the ring of wood against stone, the thrum of sandals slapping as they run. They shout to one another, calling for turns, jostling for space, their small bodies colliding in chaos. Dust rises from the cobbles, stirred by their movements, and the lantern's glow catches it, turning the air golden. Even in these narrow lanes, their game is boundless, and they run until breathless, collapsing against walls with grins wide and eyes bright. Girls too play in groups, clapping hands to rhythm games, singing chants that echo with melody older than memory. Their voices rise in a chorus that seems almost like prayer, yet filled with laughter. Some play with dolls made of cloth and wood, dressing and undressing them, mimicking the gestures of mothers. Others balance small jars on their heads, practicing the poise they see daily in women at fountains. Their play is an imitation of life, a rehearsal for roles they will one day inhabit, yet for now it is joy, free and unburdened. The lantern glows upon their small hands, quick and nimble, weaving reeds into simple toys, braiding one another's hair with practiced ease. In another corner, a group gathers around chalk marks scratched on the ground. They play a game of lines and boxes, tossing stones onto squares, hopping in patterns. The chalk, faint but visible, forms a map of competition, and their voices rise in triumph or frustration with each move. Rome's streets, so often harsh and unforgiving, become here the boards of endless games, transformed by imagination. The lantern hovers gently, illuminating not only the children but the resilience of play itself, how even in the dust of empire, laughter blooms. Sometimes their games grow rougher. Boys wrestle, grappling in imitation of gladiators, their small bodies straining, their faces fierce. The crowd cheers, some siding with one, some with another, until a tumble leaves them both laughing, bruised but unbowed. Sticks become swords, cloaks become shields, and the alley becomes an arena. They mimic the spectacles they hear whispered about or glimpse at the Colosseum, transforming fear into play. The lantern's glow makes their wooden swords gleam like steel, their shouts echo like a crowd's roar, until the game dissolves once more into laughter and boasts. Animals join too. Dogs bark and chase after children, tails wagging, eager companions. A goat tugs at a rope tied to a post, watched by giggling boys who try to ride its back. Birds scatter at sudden shouts, their wings flashing in the sunlight. Rome is not only stone and labour, but also the companionship of animals that share in its noise, and the lantern glows upon them too, acknowledging their place in this tapestry of play. Yet play is not without shadow. In a corner, two boys argue over a lost knucklebone, their voices rising into shrieks. One strikes the other, and tears flow. A girl sits apart, hugging her doll, watching the others with longing but too shy to join. An older boy cheats blatantly, and the younger children protest in vain. The lantern lingers on these small sorrows, for they too are part of childhood. The lessons of loss, the pain of exclusion, the sting of unfairness. Even in play, Rome teaches its children that life is struggle, that victories and defeats are shared unevenly. Still, the dominant note is joy. Their laughter fills the alleys, echoing off walls, rising above the mutters of adults. Mothers call from windows, warning children not to stray too far, while fathers glance with weary smiles as they return from work. The city is harsh, yet children carve joy from its stones with the tools of imagination. Their games remind you that beneath the weight of empire lies something simple and enduring: the need to laugh, to move, to belong. The lantern drifts slowly onward, leaving behind the sound of hoops rolling, knucklebones clattering, songs chanted in rhythm. These voices fade into the larger hum of the city, where commerce thickens and trade swells. Ahead lies the market, that beating heart of exchange, where smells and shouts fill the air like a storm. And so, the lantern turns its path towards stalls heavy with goods, where Rome reveals itself through abundance and desire. The lantern sways as it leads you onward, its flame small but steady against the flood of daylight that now fills the streets. Around you, the murmur of voices grows louder, denser, until it becomes a roar, the unmistakable sound of Rome's markets. Here, commerce takes on the form of theatre, each stall a stage, each merchant an actor, each buyer a participant in the endless negotiation of survival and desire. The forum may be the city's political heart, the temples its spiritual lungs, but the markets are its stomach, rumbling, insistent, and always hungry. As you step into their midst, guided by the lantern's flicker, you feel the rhythm of exchange beat as strongly as any drum, the pulse of a city forever trading, forever consuming. The air is immediately thick with smells, pungent fish glistening on wooden slabs, their scales catching the light, sharp spices wafting from baskets filled with pepper, cinnamon, cumin, brought by caravan from distant lands, sweet figs and dates piled high, sticky with juice, fresh bread carried still warm from bakeries, crusts cracking beneath eager hands. Smoke drifts from roasting meats. The tang of garum, the fermented fish sauce beloved of Romans, lingers heavy in the air. Each scent competes, colliding in a storm that is overwhelming and yet strangely intoxicating. The lantern glows across baskets, amphorae, slabs of marble used as counters, revealing how every object has been placed to entice, to tempt, to demand attention. The sounds are no less intense. Merchants shout above the din, their voices trained like orators to cut through the chaos. "Fresh mackerel from Ostia," one bellows. "Dates sweeter than honey," calls another. A cloth seller unfurls a bolt of dyed wool, shaking it out with dramatic flair, the fabric catching the light as he proclaims its fineness. Customers argue, laugh, scowl, and praise, their hands gesturing as much as their voices. Coins clink, bargains are struck, insults traded. The market is not polite, not gentle. It is vigorous, alive, a contest of wills as much as of goods. The lantern lingers on faces in the crowd. A woman in a simple tunic holds a small purse tightly, her eyes darting from stall to stall, measuring where her few coins will stretch furthest. A wealthy man, accompanied by slaves, points lazily at items, his purchases gathered without hesitation. Children tug at their mothers' hands, begging for sweet cakes or toys. A slave sent by his master haggles fiercely, for he knows the blame will fall on him if the price is too high. Each person has their role, each transaction its own weight of importance, and through it all, the market thrums with equality of necessity. Hunger and desire bind all who enter. The stalls themselves are a kaleidoscope. In one corner, fishmongers display their catch, the lanterns glow glancing off silver scales, the smell sharp and salty. They gut and slice with practiced ease, tossing scraps into baskets for cats who prowl hungrily nearby. Across the lane, butchers hang cuts of meat from hooks, their knives flashing as they carve portions, their aprons stained deep red. Customers press close, pointing, arguing over price, questioning freshness. The air is filled with the crack of bones, the hiss of knives on stone. Nearby, stalls of fruit and vegetables overflow, baskets of apples gleaming red, bunches of grapes spilling over edges, heaps of cabbages and onions, bundles of leeks tied with twine. Farmers from the countryside call out their wares, their accents different from city-born merchants, their hands rough from soil. The lantern glows on their weathered faces, showing pride in their goods, even as city folk wrinkle noses at dirt clinging to roots. Beyond, jars of honey glisten golden, amphorae of oil stand tall, their surfaces stamped with the marks of provinces far away, Baetica, Hispania, Africa. Here, The empire reveals itself not only in marble, but in food carried across its roads and seas. Textiles, too, draw crowds. Bolts of wool, dyed crimson or purple, prized colours of wealth, hang for display. Linen from Egypt, soft and cool, is folded neatly. Coarse cloth for common tunics lies in heaps. Women finger fabrics, bargaining, weighing what their households can afford. Some look wistfully at fine silks from the east, their cost far beyond reach. The lantern sways gently, catching the sheen of colours, the shimmer of threads, the touch of longing in a woman's eyes before she turns back to practical purchases. The market is also filled with sound beyond speech. Musicians play near entrances, their flutes and drums adding rhythm to the chaos. Jugglers perform for coins, their movements quick, their laughter inviting. A fortune teller sets up a small stool, offering glimpses of fate in cards or the patterns of birds. Children gather around entertainers, their laughter sharp above the deeper hum of bargaining. The lantern glows on these performers, illuminating the way commerce and entertainment are bound together. For in Rome, even buying onions and sandals is wrapped in spectacle. Arguments flare often. A merchant insists his olives are the finest. A customer accuses him of watering his wine. Voices rise, hands wave, crowds gather to watch. Sometimes, blows are exchanged, quickly broken up by neighbours who fear disruption will drive customers away. Yet these quarrels too are part of the market's pulse, the energy that makes it more than mere trade. Each dispute is remembered, repeated, woven into gossip that spreads through alleys. The lantern drifts across these scenes, never lingering long, for they are as fleeting as they are intense. Amid the chaos, moments of tenderness appear. A father lifts his child onto his shoulders so she can see above the crowd. An old woman offers a fig to a hungry boy. A merchant slips an extra onion into a poor woman's basket, pretending not to notice. These gestures soften the market's harshness, remind us that even in the clamour of commerce, kindness can bloom. The lantern glows warmly upon them, as if honouring these quiet acts amid the roar. As noon approaches, the market reaches its peak. The noise is overwhelming now, a wave of sound and scent that engulfs all who enter. The lantern, though small, seems to steady itself, guiding you through the throng, illuminating faces, gestures, wares. You realize that here the empire's grandeur becomes intimate. Marble arches may proclaim power, but it is in the exchange of bread, fish, and cloth that Rome truly breathes. The market is not only pulse but lifeblood, sustaining millions with its endless rhythm of give and take. At last the lantern drifts away, leaving behind the roar, guiding you toward narrower streets again. The scent of fish and spices fades, replaced by smoke and the hum of voices more subdued. Ahead lies a different kind of gathering: taverns, where workers pause, where laughter is low, where wine and stew soften the weariness of midday. The lantern's flame steadies, ready to show you the quieter respite of lunch. The lantern drifts gently from the thunder of the market, where shouting merchants and clinking coins still echo behind, into narrower streets where the air is thicker with smoke and the scent of cooking. It is midday now. The sun presses heavily upon roofs and cobblestones, and the city's rhythm shifts. Workers pause, errands slow. Even the hum of politics in the forum softens as stomachs demand attention. Here, scattered across Rome's neighbourhoods, stand the taverns Poponi and Caeponi, smoky, crowded, alive with laughter, grumbling, bargaining, and song. They are not grand dining halls of patricians, but humble refuges of labourers, slaves, travellers, and artisans, places where hunger and thirst are met with stew, bread, olives, and cheap wine. The lantern's flame sways at the threshold of one such tavern, and you follow it inside, into the dim glow of midday rest. The first thing that strikes you is the smell. A mingling of garum's sharp tang, meat sizzling in oil, wine sour but inviting, smoke from hearths curling into rafters. The tavern is low-roofed, its walls darkened with soot, its counter of stone embedded with amphorae that hold wine, stew, and pulses. Behind the counter, the tavern keeper moves briskly, ladling portions, pouring cups, barking jokes, and insults at patrons with equal ease. His wife hovers nearby, her hands quick to scoop olives into bowls, her eyes sharper than her husband's tongue, measuring each customer to see who might cheat, who might linger without paying. The lantern hovers over long wooden benches where men sit shoulder to shoulder. Their tunics are patched, their sandals dusty, their hands roughened by work. They eat quickly, dipping bread into bowls of lentil stew, chewing with gusto, washing each mouthful down with watered wine. Conversation hums around them, low and steady. Complaints about rising grain prices, jokes about magistrates, gossip about the morning's quarrels in the market. One man, flushed from drink, begins to sing a bawdy tune, and the others laugh, clapping the table in rhythm until the tavern keeper scolds him to quiet down. The lantern glows upon their faces, illuminating the mixture of weariness and camaraderie that defines this space. In one corner, dice clatter on a board. A small group crowds around, their eyes sharp, their voices tense. Wagers are whispered, coins exchanged, accusations of cheating flare. Gambling is forbidden in theory but tolerated in practice, and taverns hum with the thrill of it. The lantern glimmers across the dice as they roll, catching the eager faces of men hoping fortune will smile upon them. For some, a single lucky throw means enough coin to eat for days. For others, a loss means hunger before the day is out. Rome's taverns feed not only bodies but hopes, fragile and dangerous as the dice themselves. Women too are present, though fewer. Some work in the tavern, serving food, carrying jugs, their movements quick and practiced, their voices sharp to fend off drunken advances. Others linger as companions, their presence both desired and judged, their laughter blending with the rough humour of men. The lantern touches their faces briefly, showing both the hardness of survival and the flicker of wit that keeps them afloat. In this world, everyone bargains, for food, for wine, for coin, for affection. At the centre of the tavern stands a large amphora, its surface dark with wine stains, its mouth open as the keeper dips ladles into it. The wine is sour, mixed with water, flavoured perhaps with herbs to mask its cheapness. Yet it is enough, and men drink deeply, their shoulders relaxing, their laughter growing louder. Bread and olives accompany it, simple and sustaining. Some stew simmers nearby, beans, barley, scraps of pork ladled generously for a few coins. The lantern glows on the steam rising from the pot, catching the droplets as they shimmer in the smoky air. Travellers also sit among the locals, their clothes dusty from roads, their eyes weary yet curious. Taverns are waypoints, places to rest and gather news. One man from the provinces speaks of harvests, another of bandits along the road. Their stories are listened to eagerly, for Rome thrives on rumour as much as fact. The lantern sways above their heads, illuminating how taverns become not only kitchens but crossroads of information, carrying whispers from distant villages into the heart of the city. Not all moments are cheerful. In a shadowed corner, a man drinks alone, his head bowed, his bread untouched. His face is weary, his hands tremble. Perhaps he has lost work, perhaps a loved one, perhaps simply hope. No one speaks to him, yet his presence is part of the tavern's truth, that it is refuge not only for laughter, but also for sorrow. The lantern glows softly upon him, as though to remind that even in Rome's noise, there is loneliness. Arguments flare too, sudden and sharp. A man accuses another of watering the wine too much. Voices rise, fists slam the table. The tavern keeper intervenes, shouting, threatening to throw them out. The tension breaks, laughter returns, and the stew continues to be ladled. Taverns survive because they contain chaos without letting it spill too far. They are both sanctuary and storm. As midday wanes, men finish their meals, wipe mouths with the backs of their hands, toss coins onto the counter, and shuffle back to work. The tavern empties gradually, leaving behind the smell of smoke and spilled wine, the echoes of laughter, the scratches of dice on wood. The keeper and his wife begin to tidy, preparing for the next wave in the evening. The lantern flickers on the worn benches, the stained amphorae, the walls darkened by years of heat and laughter. This is not a place of grandeur, but of survival, of community, of voices meeting in smoky air. Outside, the streets are quieter than the market, but filled with purpose once more. Men return to their trades, women to their errands, children to their games. The lantern moves onward, carrying you now toward a different kind of work. One quieter and more meticulous, the world of scribes, where wax tablets and papyrus scrolls preserve voices with ink instead of graffiti on plaster. The noise of taverns fades behind, replaced by the faint scratch of stylus on wax, the rustle of parchment, the whisper of words shaped carefully for memory. The lantern leaves behind the smoky tavern, where the air was thick with stew and wine, and moves toward a quieter corner of the city, where labor is not measured in sweat or hammer blows but in lines carefully etched, in words given permanence. Here you find the scribes' men seated at wooden benches, stylus in hand, their brows furrowed in concentration as they copy letters, draft contracts, and record the 1,000 details that sustain a city as vast as Rome. The streets outside are noisy, yet within their small workshops the atmosphere feels hushed, punctuated only by the faint scratching of metal on wax, the soft rustle of papyrus scrolls, the murmur of dictation. The lantern glows faintly over these tables, illuminating the subtle labor of thought and inscription. A world of words amid a city of stone. The scribe's craft begins with the tablet, rectangles of wood, hollowed slightly in their centers, filled with wax smooth and dark. With stylus in hand, one end pointed for writing, the other flat for erasing, the scribe records letters in neat, practiced strokes. Here a contract for a loan is written, there a record of grain delivery. Elsewhere, a letter dictated by an illiterate man to his family in a distant village. The stylus glides across the wax, leaving grooves that shine in the lantern's light. When a mistake is made, the flat end smooths it away, the wax warmed by breath or fingers, ready to be inscribed again. You realize how fragile memory is here, reliant on wax that may melt, on words that may vanish with one careless stroke, yet still, in these lines, the business of Rome is preserved. Papyrus too fills the workshop, imported in rolls from Egypt, its surface pale and fibrous, its smell faintly earthy. The scribes unroll sheets, weight them with small stones, dip reed pens into ink made of soot and gum, and carefully copy texts. Some are letters, folded and sealed with wax, to be carried by messengers across roads and seas. Others are contracts, carefully phrased to bind agreements between merchants. Still others are copies of poems, histories, philosophical treatises, their words multiplied so that more eyes may read. The lantern glows across the ink as it dries, turning black to a soft sheen. In this small room, amid scattered tools and piles of scrolls, the vast weight of Rome's knowledge is extended, carried forward, preserved. Customers come and go. A merchant strides in, dictating a contract for shipment of grain, his voice sharp, his tone impatient. The scribe listens carefully, repeating each phrase aloud before inscribing it, ensuring no detail is lost. A soldier arrives next, his hand rough, his voice awkward as he dictates a letter home. Words of affection, of longing, of reassurance to a mother who waits far away. The scribe softens the words, choosing gentler phrases, shaping emotion into form. In this way, the scribe becomes not only recorder but interpreter, giving voice to those without skill to write. The lantern glows on their faces, the merchants lined with calculation, the soldiers softened by memory, the scribe's calm, his hand steady as he bridges thought and inscription. Not all tasks are serious. A young man enters, grinning, dictating a playful message to a lover. His words are bold, teasing, full of innuendo. The scribe, though reserved, allows himself a small smile as he copies them, for he has written hundreds like it, knows how love and desire spill into ink as easily as debt and law. Later, a woman sends her slave to commission a brief petition to a magistrate, her voice carried indirectly, her will translated into lines she herself cannot read. Thus the scribes act as voices for the city's silent majority, intermediaries between power and those who have none. The lantern lingers on the scribe himself, bent over his table, his fingers ink-stained, his eyes weary. His work is not celebrated like that of an orator, not revered like that of a priest, yet it is essential. He holds knowledge in his hands, shaping memory into words that will outlive the moment. Without him, contracts would vanish, letters remain unspoken, laws unrecorded. His is a quiet power, hidden in wax and papyrus, one that sustains the empire as surely as soldiers or senators. You see the dignity in his craft, the patience that defines it, the strange intimacy of handling the words of others. Around the workshop, shelves hold scrolls bound with cords, labelled in careful hand. Some are copies of poetry, their margins adorned with notes. Others are registers of accounts, dull yet vital. Dust gathers on older scrolls, yet the lantern's glow makes them gleam softly, as though reminding you that even the forgotten may one day be rediscovered. Here, history sleeps in bundles of papyrus, waiting for eyes to awaken it again. The noise of the city seeps faintly through the shutters, but inside, the room time feels slower, steadier. Each word requires care, each line attention. The scribes murmur as they work, some repeating letters softly, others counting lines. Apprentices sit nearby, their hands less steady, their mistakes corrected with stern words. Ink stains their tunics, wax clings to their fingers, yet they continue, driven by the demand of a city that must be recorded. The lantern hovers above them, its glow steady, as though honouring their quiet persistence. Occasionally, laughter breaks the silence. One scribe reads aloud a particularly ridiculous letter, full of exaggeration, and the others chuckle. Another tells a joke scribbled in graffiti outside, and for a moment the room lightens. Even in labour, humour seeps through, for words can amuse as well as bind. Then silence returns, the scratch of stylus resumes, the rhythm of work reasserts itself. As the afternoon sun slants low, the scribes complete their tasks, sealing scrolls with wax, tying cords, setting aside tablets for delivery. Customers depart, some satisfied, some grumbling at the cost. The workshop quiets, yet the air remains thick with the smell of ink, with the weight of words newly born. The lantern glows across the benches one last time, illuminating the marks left behind, smudges, scraps of papyrus, grooves in wax. These traces, humble and fragile, are the threads that bind Rome's vast body together, invisible yet indispensable. The lantern turns then, leaving behind the whisper of styluses, the smell of papyrus, the patience of scribes. Ahead lies a different kind of hall, where words are not written but spoken in weighty judgment, where magistrates preside beneath towering arches, where law itself becomes spectacle. The lantern leads you toward the basilicas, where justice is argued and power weighed. The lantern leaves the quiet of the scribes' benches behind and guides you toward the vast stone basilicas that rise like guardians over the forum. These halls, immense and solemn, are not temples to gods but temples to law, places where the voice of the state is heard most directly, where disputes are settled, contracts sealed, accusations hurled, and justice performed before the eyes of the people. To step into a basilica is to enter the living memory of Rome's order, its rules made visible in marble and echo. The lantern sways gently at the threshold, its small flame paling against shafts of sunlight that filter through clerestory windows, yet it seems to insist you look closely not at grandeur alone, but at the lives entwined in judgment. Inside, the space is cavernous. High vaulted ceilings stretch above rows of columns that divide the nave into aisles, their shadows long and solemn. The floor of marble is worn smooth by countless sandals, its sheen broken by scuffs of dust and mud. Voices rise and fall, amplified by the size of the hall so that every murmur becomes a whisper carried further, every shout a thunderclap. The lantern's glow flickers against these columns, revealing carved capitals of leaves and scrolls, details meant to remind visitors that order and beauty are one. At the centre sits the magistrate, his curule chair placed upon a raised platform, flanked by attendants. His toga is arranged with meticulous care, his expression practiced into neutrality, yet his eyes are sharp, measuring every petitioner, every advocate, every word spoken. Around him, clerks unfurl scrolls, dip pens into ink, record decisions that will ripple outward into lives beyond these walls. Behind them, lictors stand with bundles of rods and axes, fasces, symbols of authority, silent but unmistakable reminders of power. The lantern lingers on their faces, hard and unsmiling, before turning back to the voices of those who plead for justice. Here, a merchant argues with another over a shipment of grain said to have spoiled in transit. His voice is heated, his gestures broad, while his opponent speaks more coolly, citing the terms of a contract. The magistrate listens, his brow furrowed, occasionally lifting a hand to silence them. Advocates step forward, trained in rhetoric, their words flowing with practiced cadence, quoting laws, twisting logic, appealing to fairness. The crowd that has gathered watches eagerly, for such disputes are entertainment as much as justice, a theatre of persuasion. The lantern glows across their faces, some amused, some scornful, some deeply invested, for in this hall reputation and livelihood may be remade in a single verdict. Elsewhere, a freedman petitions against his former master for mistreatment, his voice trembling with both fear and determination. His words falter, yet his advocate steadies him, shaping his grievance into clear accusation. Across the hall, a patrician woman brings a case concerning property, her slaves carrying scrolls of evidence, her advocate speaking with polished authority. In the basilica, rank does not vanish, but law allows voice to those who might otherwise be silenced. The lantern lingers on the freedman's face, lined with anxiety, then on the patrician's composed expression, showing the strange equality of this space. Unequal lives colliding under the same roof, weighed by the same magistrate's ear. Punishments too are decided here. A thief is brought forward, accused of stealing jewelry. His tunic is torn, his eyes dart nervously. Witnesses speak, their voices uncertain. The magistrate listens, considers, then declares sentence, repayment if possible, flogging if not. The thief bows his head, knowing the judgment is final. The crowd murmurs, some satisfied, others sympathetic, all bound to the decision. The lantern glows upon the man's bowed head, upon the clerk's steady hand as he records the punishment, upon the lictor who prepares to carry it out. Law in Rome is not abstract. It is embodied in these visible acts, in pain and recompense, in the weight of rods striking flesh. The basilica is also a place of commerce. In side aisles, bankers sit at benches, counting coins, drafting contracts. Moneylenders argue with clients, their tablets filled with figures, their voices quick and urgent. Advocates hover nearby, offering their services, whispering promises of skill in swaying magistrates. The lantern drifts across these smaller dramas, showing how law and trade mingle, how justice is intertwined with commerce. Rome's order is not only about punishment, but about keeping the wheels of exchange turning, about ensuring trust in contracts, stability in trade. You notice too the way the basilica shapes behavior. Advocates pace deliberately, their gestures studied, their tones rising and falling with rhetorical precision. Spectators murmur but lower voices when lictors glance their way. Petitioners stand nervously, eyes downcast, as if the very stones demand humility. The lantern glows on their faces, showing how architecture itself enforces discipline. The soaring ceiling, the rows of columns, the raised platform all remind each visitor that they stand beneath the authority of the state, beneath the weight of law older and greater than themselves. Occasionally, laughter breaks through the solemnity. An advocate makes a sharp joke at an opponent's expense, and the crowd chuckles. A magistrate himself smiles faintly, though quickly composes his face. For all its seriousness, the basilica is still a place of people, their flaws and humour seeping through. The lantern hovers on these moments, reminding you that even in the echo of law, humanity persists, fragile and irrepressible. As the afternoon wanes, the basilica empties slowly, cases concluded, scrolls rolled, contracts sealed, punishments decreed. Petitioners leave with relief or despair, their fates altered by words spoken within these walls. The magistrate rises, attendants gathering his robes, lictors clearing the way. The clerks tidy their tables, stacking scrolls, blowing gently on ink to dry it. The echoes fade, leaving the hall vast and quiet once more, though the weight of decisions lingers in the air, like smoke after fire. The lantern glows faintly, honouring this silence, this pause between one day's judgments and the next. Stepping back into the streets, you feel the shift again from solemnity to the softer hum of life. The city continues, its trades resuming, its families gathering, its voices rising in countless alleys. Ahead, the lantern turns toward quieter quarters, where wealthier homes stretch into courtyards filled with greenery and fountains. There, behind painted walls and tended vines, another rhythm of Rome unfolds, the life of the villa and garden. The lantern leaves behind the marble solemnity of the basilicas, where justice was measured in words and verdicts, and carries you into streets that begin to change their texture. The insulae, with their crowded balconies and noisy quarrels, give way to quieter lanes lined with higher walls that conceal within them a different world. These are the domains of the wealthy senators, equestrians, prosperous merchants, whose homes are not cramped tenements but villas, houses that open inward rather than outward, that gather light, not from the street, but from courtyards within. The lantern glows faintly as you approach one such villa, its doorway wide, its threshold marked by mosaic patterns, its air filled not with the smells of taverns or markets, but with the gentler fragrance of herbs, flowers, and fountains. Stepping across the threshold, you are immediately greeted by the atrium, the central heart of the villa. The lantern's flame reflects in the shallow pool at its center, where rainwater is gathered through an opening in the roof above. The surface ripples softly, catching the flicker of light, turning it into dozens of tiny stars. Around the atrium stand columns, their shafts painted in bright red and black, their capitals gilded with detail. The walls are adorned with frescoes, mythological scenes, landscapes, delicate garlands, each stroke of paint a declaration of wealth and taste. Slaves move quietly along the edges, sweeping floors, arranging lamps, carrying trays of fruit or jugs of wine. The villa is not merely a home but a stage, designed to impress visitors, to proclaim the dignity of its owner. Beyond the atrium lies the peristyle garden, where the lantern drifts slowly, its flame softened by sunlight filtering through columns. Here, the world feels far from the crowded streets of Rome. Carefully tended beds bloom with roses, lilies, violets. Vines climb trellises, their green leaves shading walkways. Citrus trees bear fruit that gleams in the light. In the center, a fountain murmurs, its water spilling from a sculpted dolphin's mouth into a marble basin. Birds dart among the branches, their calls mingling with the sound of water. The air is sweet with flowers, with herbs like thyme and basil grown for the kitchen, with the faint salt tang of garum jars stored discreetly nearby. The lantern glows warmly across this scene, revealing how wealth in Rome is not only measured in marble or coin, but in the ability to shape nature itself into ordered beauty. Here the master of the house strolls, clad in a tunic of fine linen, his steps measured, his eyes glancing with pride at the frescoes and fountains. He pauses to speak with a client, for villas are not only private retreats but centers of business. In the shaded portico, men gather, some waiting to present petitions, others offering services. The daily ritual of salutatio, the morning greeting of clients to patron, often flows into the spaces of these houses, blending friendship with obligation, generosity with expectation. The lantern glows on their faces, some anxious, others obsequious, all aware that in Rome, wealth is never solitary but threaded with networks of dependence. Inside, rooms branch off the atrium and peristyle, each adorned with its own details. Bedrooms with painted walls of crimson or ochre, their floors of mosaic tesserae depicting dolphins, hunters, or geometric patterns. Dining rooms with couches arranged for guests, their ceilings painted with stars. Storerooms stacked with amphorae of oil and wine, cupboards holding dishes of bronze and silver. The lantern flickers across these objects, each a testament to prosperity, to the reach of empire that brings silk from the east, ivory from Africa, spices from India. In these villas, Rome gathers the world into itself. The women of the household move quietly but purposefully, overseeing the work of slaves, arranging meals, tending to children. A matron pauses in the garden to pluck herbs, her fingers gentle, her face serene. She carries herself with dignity, for within these walls she rules as firmly as her husband in the forum. The lantern glows upon her face, showing both the softness of luxury and the strength of responsibility. Behind her, slaves bend to tasks, sweeping, grinding grain, preparing garlands of flowers. Their movements are efficient, almost invisible, yet indispensable. The villa is not merely architecture but a system of labor, of hands uncounted yet essential. In the evening, the villa will host dinner, the scene when couches will be spread, lamps lit, wine poured, dishes carried in, fish glazed with honey, pork seasoned with pepper, platters of olives, baskets of bread, bowls of fruit. Guests will recline, voices rising in conversation, laughter, even debate. For now, though, the house is quieter, a place of preparation. The lantern glows across the triclinium, the dining room. Its couch is empty, its floor mosaic gleaming faintly. You imagine the noise that will fill it later, but for now it rests, as the garden murmurs outside with its fountain. Children run through the colonnades, their sandals slapping softly. Their laughter rings out, chased by the watchful eyes of a nurse. They play with toys, wooden dolls, small carts, clay animals, their joy echoing amid painted walls. The lantern flickers across their faces, reminding you that even in wealth, childhood carries the same rhythm of play, the same bursts of laughter that fill alleys of the insulae. Yet here, their toys are finer, their games safer, their futures more assured. Still, in their shouts you hear the same timeless joy. The villa is not only luxury but also philosophy. In one corner room, the master keeps scrolls of poetry and philosophy, shelves lined with works of Virgil, Cicero, Plato. He retreats here to read, to think, to compose letters. The lantern glows across the scrolls, their edges worn from handling, their ink faintly faded. Ideas travel here as readily as goods, carried from Greece, from Egypt, from all corners of the empire. In the stillness of this study, Rome's mind dwells, contemplating virtue, governance, beauty. Yet outside the study walls, slaves chop wood, women spin wool, gardeners prune vines. The villa is both retreat and engine, both dream and labor. As the afternoon sun tilts westward, the villa seems to exhale, its shadows lengthening, its fountain whispering softer. The lantern lingers in the peristyle, its glow reflected in water, its flame trembling as a breeze stirs the roses. You sense the strange duality here. Within these walls lies peace, beauty, abundance. Beyond them, noise, dust, struggle. Rome is a city of contrasts, and nowhere is it clearer than here, where one household blooms while another crumbles. The lantern turns once more toward the street, leaving the villa and its garden behind. Outside, the air feels hotter, heavier, filled with the hum of daily toil. The city continues, its afternoon deepening. Ahead, the lantern leads you toward the languor of the hour, when heat presses down, and some seek rest while others labor on, when shadows stretch and the rhythm of Rome slows but never stops. The lantern sways slowly now, its flame smaller against the blaze of the afternoon Sunday. The streets of Rome stretch long beneath the weight of heat, their stones shimmering, their shadows sharp and still. The city, so alive with noise in the morning, begins to alter its rhythm. The pulse remains, but it is slower, more measured, as if the very air presses upon shoulders, urging bodies to rest. You feel it as you follow the lantern, a heaviness, a languor, the kind of pause that overtakes even the most restless city when the sun hangs fiercest. For the wealthy within their villas, the hours after midday are a time of retreat. Shutters are drawn, courtyards shaded, couches spread with cushions for repose. Men recline in atriums cooled by trickling fountains, sipping watered wine, closing their eyes while slaves fan them with palm fronds. Women rest in shaded rooms, their voices softer, their movements slower, their hands setting aside the spindles of wool until the air cools again. Children, too, are hushed, lulled to sleep by the drone of cicadas outside, by the stillness of heat within marble halls. The lantern glows faintly at these thresholds, illuminating the quiet of luxury, a pause that wealth affords, a silence made possible by shaded gardens and endless labouring hands. Yet in the insulae, where walls are thin and rooms are stifling, the afternoon heat is not a gift but a trial. Families huddle in the shade of doorways, hoping for a breeze that seldom comes. Children grow restless, their laughter subdued, their bodies sticky with sweat. Women sit with bowls of water at their feet, sponging their faces, fanning themselves with scraps of cloth. Men return from taverns or markets, stretching on wooden benches, muttering about the weight of the Sunday. For them, there is no siesta in cool chambers, no fountain to soothe only endurance. The lantern lingers on their weary faces, glowing softly on jars of water set by doors, on sandals kicked off, on the resigned slowness of lives bound to the heat. In the streets, the change is visible, the crowds thin, the market stalls that roared with noise earlier stand quieter, their vendors dozing behind baskets of fruit, their voices muted. Donkeys rest in the shade of walls, tails flicking lazily. Dogs stretch in doorways, eyes half shut, too weary to bark. Even the pigeons gather in clusters, wings drooping. The clamour of Rome subsides into a hum, punctuated only by the occasional call of a water seller or the distant ring of a blacksmith who refuses to yield to the Sunday. The lantern sways through this softened world, its flame delicate against the brightness, showing you how a city of millions can seem. For a few hours, half asleep, not all pause, of course. Labour cannot cease for the poor, and so you see water carriers still trudging with yokes across their shoulders, sweat running down their backs. Bakers remain at their ovens, the fire within, making no concession to the fire without. Slaves scrub floors, carry loads, tend fires, their bodies bowed but unrelenting. Builders at construction sites wipe brows and drink from skins, then return to lifting stones, their voices hoarse in the heat. These are the unseen hours, the toil that continues even as others sleep. The lantern glows across their bent figures, revealing the endurance that keeps Rome alive while others dream. On the roads at the city's edge, travellers push forward, unwilling to waste time though the heat scorches. Merchants drive carts creaking with amphorae, soldiers march with armour clanking, peasants herd animals bleating in protest. Dust rises in clouds behind them, shimmering in sunlight, coating skin and tunics. The lantern catches the gleam of sweat, the squint of eyes against glare, the determination to press on despite the sun's burden. Life cannot stop, Rome cannot wait. Even in its pause, the city demands motion. Inside taverns, a different rhythm emerges. Those who cannot afford luxury siestas linger longer, sipping wine slowly, speaking in hushed tones. Dice rattle lazily, songs drift half-heartedly, voices soften. The heat seeps even here, dulling tempers, stretching minutes. Yet the tavern remains refuge, its shade welcome, its company a balm. The lantern glows across benches where men nap with heads upon arms, where laughter bursts briefly before fading into murmurs. It is survival, not leisure, but it softens the edge of the Sunday. The very air seems to shimmer. From rooftops, heat rises in waves, distorting the outlines of tiles and chimneys. Streets gleam as if slick with oil, though they are dry. Eyes ache in the glare, and voices sound different, flattened by the stillness. The lantern's flame flickers faintly, fragile against such brilliance, yet it continues, guiding you through this suspended hour. You feel the weight of the sun on your shoulders, the lull that overtakes thought, the sense that time itself slows beneath the blaze. And yet, beneath this slowness, the city waits. You sense it in the twitch of donkeys' ears, in the restless stirrings of children, in the murmurs of men reclining in shade. Rome rests, but only for a while. Soon shadows will lengthen, air will cool, and streets will stir again with energy. Already you hear faint sounds returning, a hammer striking in a smithy, the call of a vendor reopening his stall, the laughter of children slipping back into alleys. The pause is ending, the day resuming its pace. The lantern sways onward, leading you gently out of the languid silence. Ahead lies a richer scent, one that stirs the stomach and the imagination alike. Kitchens coming to life, pots bubbling, meats roasting, bread warming once more. For as the heat softens, Rome turns toward its evening meal, toward the preparations of dinner that will fill courtyards and alleys alike with fragrance. The lantern's glow brightens in anticipation, ready to illuminate the labor of kitchens and the promise of feasting. The lantern drifts on from the shimmering stillness of afternoon, its flame steadier now as shadows lengthen, and the oppressive blaze begins to soften. The city exhales after the hours of languor, and movement stirs again in the streets. Voices rise, shutters open, sandals scrape once more along the stones. Rome awakens from its half-sleep, and its first instinct is hunger. The evening meal is the centerpiece of the day, and everywhere kitchens swell into life, hearths are stoked, pots set to bubbling, knives drawn across boards. The lantern glows warmly as it weaves between homes, taverns, and villas, showing you how this shared ritual unfolds across every layer of the city, how Rome prepares to feed itself when day begins to slide into night. The smells come first, carried on the cooling breeze. From humble insular kitchens comes the earthy aroma of porridge thickened with lentils, the sharp tang of onions sizzling in oil, the unmistakable pungency of garum poured into pots to flavor stews. In wealthier villas, the air is richer, roasting meats seasoned with pepper, herbs crushed into sauces, fish steaming in fig leaves, bread warmed anew. The scents mingle in the air, blending into a symphony of flavor that floats above the rooftops, making mouths water and stomachs stir. The lantern seems to flicker more brightly here, as if even its flame is drawn to the promise of food. In the cramped rooms of the poor, dinner is modest. Families gather around clay pots set on small hearths, stirring stews of beans and barley, dipping stale bread into bowls to soften it. Children crowd eagerly, their hands stretching for olives or scraps of cheese. A mother blows on a spoon to cool porridge for a toddler, her face tired but gentle. A father returns from the day's labor, laying his tools aside with a sigh, accepting his portion without complaint. The lantern glows softly upon them, illuminating not abundance but endurance, the way survival itself becomes ritual. Their meal may be small, but it binds them together, giving strength for another day. In taverns, the atmosphere is louder. The counter steams with dishes prepared for those who cannot or will not cook at home. Bowls of stew are ladled out, bread stacked high, amphorae tipped to fill clay cups with wine. Workers crowd benches, their voices raised in jokes, quarrels, songs. Dice clatter once more, laughter bursts, arguments flare. The tavern keeper shouts orders, his wife stirs pots, their slaves hurry with trays. The lantern glimmers across bowls and faces, catching the gleam of oil in stew, the shine of sweat on brows, the sparkle of wine in cups. Here, dinner is not quiet but communal, an extension of the marketplace, a place where hunger meets fellowship. In the villas, preparations are more elaborate, bordering on ceremony. Slaves bustle in kitchens vast and hot, their bodies moving quickly, their voices sharp. Fires roar in great hearths, spits turn with roasting birds, pots bubble with sauces thickened by honey and wine. Herbs are chopped finely, garlands of flowers woven for the dining room, lamps trimmed and filled with oil. The matron oversees, her eye critical, ensuring no detail is missed. The master prepares to receive guests, slaves arranging couches in the triclinium, laying out fine dishes of silver and bronze, arranging wine jars by vintage. The lantern lingers here, illuminating the contrast. Where the poor stir humble stews, the wealthy orchestrate feasts that are as much about display as nourishment. Food itself tells the story of empire. Dates from the desert, olives from Hispania, wine from Campania, fish from the coasts, spices from the east, all converge upon Roman tables. Even the simplest household might taste distant lands in a handful of pepper or a drizzle of oil. In this way, the empire is digested daily, its reach made tangible in flavor. The lantern flickers across amphorae, stamped with names of provinces, across plates bearing fruits that traveled weeks to arrive, across spices that once rode in camel caravans. Rome eats the world, and in eating it, affirms its dominion. Children dart about kitchens and courtyards, their laughter mingling with the clang of pots. They steal figs from bowls, snatch olives from trays, giggle as slaves chase them away. Dogs linger at thresholds, noses twitching, tails wagging, hopeful for scraps. The lantern glows fondly upon these small thieves, upon the animals whose patience is often rewarded, upon the life that swirls around food as much as in temples or forums. Dinner is more than sustenance. It is community, noise, rhythm. As preparations peak, voices swell. In the insulae, neighbours call from window to window, comparing meals, sharing salt, lending a handful of lentils. In taverns, songs grow louder, dice rattle harder, cups clink. In villas, guests arrive, greeted with ritual bows, ushered toward couches, their sandals removed, their hands washed in perfumed water. The lantern glows across these varied scenes, each unique yet united in purpose, to eat, to drink, to end the day together. The sun sinks lower, painting the sky in crimson and gold. Lamps are lit in homes, their flames multiplying the lantern's glow, spreading warmth across courtyards and rooms. Shadows stretch, and the city itself seems to lean into the evening. Food is carried forth, bowls steaming, plates laden, baskets filled. Stomachs growl, mouths water, eyes brighten. The long day of labour, heat, and noise has led to this moment, the gathering around food, the renewal of strength, the sharing of bread. The lantern lingers, honouring the bustle of kitchens, the clatter of dishes, the murmurs of prayer to household gods before meals, the eager hands reaching. It glows upon faces softened by the promise of fullness, upon flames that flicker in hearths and lamps alike, upon the union of survival and celebration. Dinner is about to begin, and with it comes not only satisfaction but conversation, storytelling, laughter, the weaving of community into night. Slowly, the lantern begins to drift onward once more, leaving behind the kitchens that steam with preparation, the courtyards fragrant with herbs, the taverns alive with song. Ahead lies twilight itself, when families, neighbours, and strangers gather around couches and tables, when songs and tales rise into the evening air, when lamps burn steadily against the dark. The lantern brightens, as though eager to join them, ready to illuminate the gatherings that mark Rome's passage from day into night. The lantern moves forward into the hour, when day loosens its grip and night begins to rise, when the heat of afternoon fades into a gentler coolness and the first stars appear above the rooftops. Rome shifts once more, its rhythm changing as families, neighbours, and strangers come together around food and light. Dinner is no longer mere preparation but reality, and throughout the city, from the humblest insula to the grandest villa, the evening meal is shared in spaces alive with talk, music, and memory. The lantern glows warmly, almost joyfully, as if it too delights in this hour when the city breathes as one, bound by the universal ritual of eating and gathering. In the insulae, where rooms are small and air is heavy, families gather close around low tables or even on the floor. A clay lamp flickers in the centre, its tiny flame casting shadows against plastered walls scratched with graffiti. A pot of stew is ladled into bowls, bread is torn into pieces and passed from hand to hand. Children giggle between mouthfuls, dipping crusts into sauce, stealing bites from one another's portions. Parents exchange weary smiles, speaking softly of the day's work, of debts owed, of neighbours quarrelling through thin walls. The lantern glows across their faces, illuminating lines of weariness and moments of tenderness. Here, the meal is simple, but the togetherness transforms it into a feast of survival. In taverns, the noise swells with the dusk. Men recline on benches or sit shoulder to shoulder, raising cups of wine that gleam in the lamplight. Bowls of porridge and beans are set before them, plates of fish fried crisp in oil, trays of olives salted sharp. Laughter erupts at jokes, half shouted across the room. Dice clatter with renewed vigour, fortunes won and lost in an instant. A singer stands near the counter, plucking at a lyre, her voice carrying a tune that silences even the loudest patrons for a moment before applause breaks. The tavern keeper beams, shouting over the din, his wife moving swiftly with trays. The lantern hovers over this raucous scene, its glow softened by smoke, its flame reflected in cups raised high, as if joining in the toast. In villas, the scene unfolds with elegance. Guests recline on couches arranged in the triclinium, three sides of a square around low tables laden with dishes. Slaves move silently, carrying platters, roasted meats glazed with honey, fish served with herbs, pears stewed in wine, figs split and dripping with sweetness. Amphorae of wine are opened, cups refilled as quickly as they are drained. Conversation flows as freely as drink senators, debating laws, poets reciting verses, generals recounting campaigns. The lantern glows upon their polished dishes, their jeweled rings, their faces animated by laughter or furrowed in argument. Yet amid luxury, the essence is the same: to eat together, to share stories, to bind themselves through presence. The air across the city is filled with overlapping layers of sound. From insulae windows drift lullabies sung to children, soft and weary. From taverns burst shouts of laughter, songs bawdy and bold. From villas come the measured tones of rhetoric, punctuated by bursts of applause. Dogs bark at scraps tossed into alleys, cats yowl from rooftops, flutes and drums from street performers weave through the murmur. The lantern drifts through it all, its flame brightening against the deepening dark, reflecting the unity beneath the diversity. Whether in splendor or in simplicity, Rome gathers when twilight falls. Stories rise naturally in these hours. A father in an insula recounts his youth to children wide-eyed at tales of long journeys. A tavern singer weaves a ballad of heroes, her song carrying bits of history and myth to ears weary of daily labor. In villas, poets recite verses, their words rich with metaphor, their lines meant to impress. The lantern glows upon each, honoring the human impulse to turn meal into memory, sustenance into story. Rome is not only fed by bread and meat, but by words that shape its sense of itself. Not all gatherings are peaceful. In taverns, arguments ignite over dice, voices grow harsh, fists slam upon tables. In insulae, neighbors quarrel across balconies about noise or smoke. Even in villas, debates among senators turn heated, laughter dissolving into tension. Yet even these conflicts carry a kind of rhythm, for Rome thrives on friction as much as on harmony. The lantern flickers across clenched fists and furrowed brows, but also across reconciliations, a shared drink, a hand extended, a laugh that smooths quarrel into jest. The city is noisy, flawed, alive. As lamps multiply across the city, the streets themselves become gentler. Windows glow with light, alleys illuminated by small flames, shadows dance along walls, softening the hardness of stone. Neighbors linger at doorways, exchanging final words, wishing one another good health, gossiping quietly. Lovers meet in corners, their whispers hidden by the hum of night. Children fall asleep on mothers' laps, their laughter replaced by steady breathing. The lantern glows upon all of it, its flame mirrored in dozens of others, as Rome transforms into a constellation of lamps. Above, the sky deepens into velvet blue, stars pricking through the last blush of twilight. The city, though still noisy, carries a different quality, now less urgency, more ease. The work of the day is done, the meals consumed, the stories told. Rome is at rest in its own way, not silent, but satisfied. The lantern glows proudly, as if content to share its flame with countless others lit across the city. And yet, night will bring its own stories of watchmen pacing streets, of thieves moving in shadow, of dreams weaving behind closed eyes. The lantern begins to drift higher now, lifting its glow above the rooftops, preparing to show you the city as it sleeps, to guide you into the hush that follows noise, into the quiet breath of Rome at night. The lantern rises gently now, higher and higher above the streets, its flame flickering in the deepening dark, as the noise of evening softens into the quiet breath of night. Rome sprawls beneath it, vast and intricate, a city that has filled the day with markets and temples, baths and taverns, laughter and quarrels, sweat and prayer. Now, as the stars wheel slowly overhead, the rhythm shifts again. The city does not fall silent. Rome is too immense, too restless for complete stillness, but it changes its voice, lowering from a roar to a murmur, from clamor to whispers. The lantern glows steadily, as though content to keep watch, to see what the night reveals. From above, the rooftops stretch like a patchwork quilt, tiles gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Small plumes of smoke rise from chimneys, where last embers of fires still burn. Courtyards shimmer with the glow of lamps, their flames reflected in pools and fountains. The streets below twist and narrow, their cobbles glistening faintly with dew, their corners softened by shadow. The lantern hovers, casting its light gently downward, illuminating fragments of this sleeping city. A shutter closed firmly, a doorway left ajar, a dog curled upon a step. In the insulae, families settle into uneasy rest. Children lie tangled in blankets, their laughter finally hushed, their breathing even. Mothers stretch wearily, their eyes closing as the day's labor slips away. Fathers murmur final words, promises to rise early, to try again tomorrow. The walls, thin and permeable, carry faint sounds, a cough, a sigh, a whispered prayer. Some lie awake, staring into darkness, minds heavy with debts or dreams. The lantern glows upon their faces, softening their weariness, as though to remind them that night itself is a kind of mercy. In villas, the quiet is richer, the air cooler. Courtyards lit with oil lamps glow softly, fountains still murmuring. Guests have departed, slaves clear dishes in silence, and masters recline in chambers perfumed with incense. Scrolls are set aside, sandals removed, lamps dimmed. In children's rooms, nurses soothe little ones into slumber with lullabies, their voices soft as the wings of doves. The lantern drifts through these halls, illuminating frescoes that gleam faintly in lamplight, mosaics that shimmer under shadow. Here, wealth ensures comfort, but sleep is no less human. The closing of eyes, the surrender to night. In taverns, the energy lingers longer. Patrons sing still, their voices rough with wine, their songs uneven but heartfelt. Dice clatter once more, though slower now, as coins exchange hands for the last time. A drunken man dozes with his head on the counter. Another stumbles out into the alley, laughing to himself. The keeper snuffs lamps one by one, muttering at the mess to be cleaned in the morning. The lantern hovers here, casting a final glow on spilled wine, on empty bowls, on the laughter that refuses to fade entirely. Even in night, the tavern resists silence. Elsewhere, the city's shadows stir with different lives. Watchmen pace the streets, their torches casting long lines of light across stone. They call out to one another, their voices steady, ensuring that order holds in the hours when law is more fragile. Yet thieves slip quietly in the dark, their eyes sharp, their steps soft, seeking unguarded doors, unwatched stalls. Lovers meet in corners, their whispers hidden by the hum of night. The lantern glows faintly upon them all, impartial, acknowledging that Rome by night belongs not only to order, but to risk, to longing, to secrecy. From the Tiber rises a cool mist, drifting into lower streets. Barges rest quietly along the banks, their cargo secured, their crews asleep. The water reflects the moon and the faint glow of lamps, turning the river into a ribbon of silver winding through the city. Bridges stretch across it, their arches dark beneath, their stones worn by centuries of footsteps. The lantern hovers above, its flame mirrored faintly in the water, as though the river itself were carrying a second light downstream. Above, the hills that ring Rome glow faintly with scattered fires. Villas dot their slopes, watchtowers keep silent vigil, temples gleam pale in moonlight. From the Palatine, the imperial palace rises, its vast bulk shadowed but unmistakable, a symbol of power that never sleeps. Somewhere within, an emperor dreams, his thoughts unknown, his fate as fragile as any man's. The lantern glows faintly upon the palace walls, acknowledging the weight of power, then drifts onward. For Rome is not only rulers but millions, each with their own night. As midnight deepens, the city grows quieter still. Even taverns empty, even streets fall silent. Dogs alone bark in the distance. Owls call from rooftops. The lantern floats high above, gazing down upon the sleeping city. Its flame seems to steady, to take on a solemn dignity, as if aware that it is the guardian of these hours, the keeper of Rome's breath in darkness. The voices of day have faded, but dreams rise to replace them. Dreams of gladiators awaiting battle, of merchants counting imagined profit, of mothers hoping for health, of children laughing still in their sleep. The lantern glows softly on these unseen visions, on the fragile hopes carried into night. It has led you through alleys and fountains, through baths and markets, through temples and villas, through quarrels and laughter, through toil and rest. Now it floats above it all, above the rooftops and arches, above the Colosseum and the Forum, its flame a quiet echo of the sun, holding vigil until dawn. Rome lies beneath, immense and eternal, its millions breathing as one vast body, its heart still beating even in sleep. And so the lantern keeps watch, its flame steady against the night, a symbol of continuity, of memory, of presence. The streets are hushed, the courtyards dim, the walls whisper only to the moon. Rome dreams, and the lantern floats above, casting its glow upon the city, reminding you that though the day has ended, life endures, and tomorrow, with its markets, its baths, its bread, its quarrels, its prayers, will come again.